Hello guys, welcome to Percy Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Percy read the Naruto was adopted by the god and goddess? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sea Meets Sun. The world shimmered like heat waves off summer asphalt, and for the third time that week, Percy Jackson watched reality fracture before his eyes. Not again, he muttered, gripping Riptide tight. As the familiar disorientation washed over him. One moment he was standing on the beach at Camp Half-Blood, waves lapping gently at his feet during his morning patrol. The next, those same waves transformed into a rushing waterfall cascading down a mountain carved with enormous faces. The air felt different, charged with an unfamiliar energy that made his skin tingle and his demigod senses scream in confusion. Percy blinked, and the world snapped back to normal. Just another hallucination. They'd been coming more frequently now, glimpses of a world that couldn't possibly exist alongside his own. "You look like you've seen a ghost," came a familiar voice. Annabeth approached along the shoreline, her blonde hair caught in the morning breeze. "Another episode," Percy nodded, sheathing his sword. "Fourth this week. They're getting stronger, more vivid. I swear I could almost touch that waterfall." Annabeth's gray eyes studied him with the calculated intensity he'd grown to love. "Chiron wants to see you. He's worried these visions might be something more than stress. When is anything ever just stress in our world?" Percy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They walked in comfortable silence toward the big house. Percy still unsettled. These weren't like normal demigod dreams or visions. They felt like reality itself was thinning, becoming permeable. And worse, they only happened to him. "You're brooding again," Annabeth said, bumping his shoulder with hers. "Just thinking. That's my department, seaweed brain." The familiar banter helped, but couldn't fully distract him from the nagging certainty that something fundamental was changing. The camp looked peaceful in the morning light. Demigods training in the arena, satyrs playing pipes in the strawberry fields, the familiar scent of breakfast wafting from the dining pavilion. But to Percy, it felt like the calm before a hurricane. Chiron waited for them on the porch, his tail flicking nervously, never a good sign. The ancient centaur's face bore the weathered expression Percy had come to recognize as his "bad news incoming" look. "Percy, Annabeth," he greeted them, setting aside a worn book with strange symbols Percy didn't recognize. "I've been consulting with several sources about your experiences." And Percy prompted when Chiron hesitated. "And I'm afraid I've found troubling correlations. The timing of your episodes corresponds precisely with fluctuations in the divine barriers we've been monitoring." Annabeth frowned. "What divine barriers?" "The ones that separate different spheres of existence." Chiron's hooves clopped anxiously against the wooden porch. "Percy, these aren't hallucinations. I believe you're experiencing momentary breaches between realities." Percy felt his stomach drop. "You're saying other worlds are real. And somehow, I'm seeing them." "Not just any worlds," Chiron said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "What you've described, the mountain with faces, people walking on water. The strange energy, these align with a particular realm that should have no connection to ours." A scream cut through the air from the direction of Half-Blood Hill, followed by the unmistakable blast of the camp's warning conch. "We're under attack," a camper shouted, running toward them. "The barrier is failing." Percy's instincts kicked in immediately. "Annabeth, I know. Battle stations," she replied, already drawing her dagger. "I'll organize defense at the cabins." Percy uncapped Riptide, the celestial bronze sword expanding to its full length. "I'll head to the hill." Chiron looked grimmer than Percy had ever seen him. "Be careful. I fear this may be connected to what we were just discussing." Percy sprinted toward Half-Blood Hill, where chaos had erupted. The magical barrier that protected the camp was visible now, something that normally only happened when it was under extreme stress. It rippled like disturbed water, sections fading in and out. Through the fluctuating barrier, Percy could see dark figures approaching. They moved wrong. Too fast, too fluid. Not monsters, not in the traditional Greek sense. The first attacker breached the barrier before Percy reached the hill. A figure dressed in black with a porcelain mask concealing their face landed in a crouch that no human should have been capable of from that height. In their hand gleamed what looked like a short sword, but unlike any Percy had seen before. "What the?" he began, but the figure was already moving, hands forming strange gestures before their chest. The air in front of them shimmered, and suddenly a fireball erupted toward the nearest group of demigods. Percy reacted instinctively, reaching for the creek that ran nearby. Water surged up in response to his will, intercepting the flames in a hiss of steam. More figures poured through the weakening barrier, 5, 10, 20, all with the same fluid movements and strange masks. Some wielded weapons while others moved their hands in those peculiar patterns before unleashing impossible attacks, earth rising in spikes, wind slicing like blades, lightning arcing from fingertips. "Fall back to defensive positions," Percy shouted to the scattered campers, many of whom stood frozen in shock at attacks that defied their understanding of monsters. A camper from the Apollo cabin loosed arrows at one of the attackers, but he masked figure seemed to vanish in a blur of movement, reappearing behind the archer. Percy lunged forward, riptide slashing in a deadly arc that the attacker barely avoided. "Who are you?" Percy demanded. "What do you want?" The masked figure tilted their head, studying Percy with unsettling intensity through eye-holes in the porcelain. "The dimensional anchor," they replied, voice muffled and emotionless. "You carry both energies. You are the bridge that must be severed." Before Percy could process the cryptic statement, the attacker's hands blurred through more gestures, and the ground beneath Percy's feet turned to liquid mud. Threatening to swallow him, he leapt back, calling more water to his aid, feeling the familiar tug in his gut as he shaped it into a massive fist that slammed into his opponent. But something felt different. As the water responded to his command, Percy felt another energy stirring within him, unfamiliar yet somehow deeply resonant, flowing alongside his usual demigod powers. The water that struck the attacker wasn't just water. It glowed with a faint blue luminescence and hit with far more force than Percy had intended, sending the masked figure crashing through a tree. Percy stared at his hands in shock, but had no time to wonder about what had just happened. All around him, Camp Half-Blood was transforming into a battlefield. Clarice led a phalanx of Ares campers against a group of attackers, while the Hephaestus cabin deployed automatons that engaged the invaders with mechanical precision. Despite their efforts, the campers were outmatched. SA weren't mindless monsters but disciplined warriors with powers that seemed to bend the elements themselves. Percy fought his way toward Talia's pine tree, where the heaviest fighting concentrated around the failing barrier. A blast of wind knocked him sideways, and he rolled to his feet to face three masked attackers surrounding him. One held what looked like a scroll, unfurling it to reveal complex symbols that began to glow ominously. "The convergence approaches," one of them stated flatly. "The anchor must not remain." Percy felt rage building inside him. These strangers were attacking his home, threatening his friends, all while speaking in riddles. The strange energy he'd felt earlier surged again, stronger this time, mingling with his demigod powers in a way that felt simultaneously wrong and perfectly natural. "I don't know what you're talking about," Percy growled, "but you picked the wrong camp to invade." He raised his hands, expecting the usual rush of water. Instead, energy inside him responded differently. Water still answered his call, but now it spiraled around him in a pattern he'd never created before, forming rotating rings that pulsed with that same blue luminescence. The sensation was exhilarating and terrifying, power flowing through pathways in his body he hadn't known existed. The attackers hesitated, and one made a sound of surprise behind their mask. "He's manifesting chakra. How is this possible?" The report said he was only awakened to ichor. "Irrelevant. Complete the ceiling." The one with the scroll slammed it to the ground, and complex turns of light spread outward in a circle. Percy felt something pulling at him. Not his body, but something deeper, as though these strange symbols were trying to lock away the new energy he'd just discovered. Instinctively, he pushed back against the sensation, the water around him responding by forming a counter pattern that disrupted the spreading symbols. The clash of energies created a shockwave that blasted outward, knocking all of them off their feet. Percy recovered first, pressing his advantage. He charged the scroll bearer, riptide a bronze blur as he closed the distance. The attack, Abandoned the damaged scroll and drew a weapon, a strange knife with a ring at the end of its hilt. Metal clanged against metal as they exchanged blows, Percy's years of combat training matching the attacker's inhuman speed. Behind him, screams and explosions indicated the battle was spreading throughout the camp. Percy needed to end this quickly and help the others. As he parried another strike, he felt that dual energy surging again, and this time he didn't fight it. Water from the nearby creek rose in a massive wave, but as it crashed down, Percy somehow knew exactly how to shape it, not just with his will as he always had, but with this new energy flowing through specific channels in his body. The water compressed into high-pressure jets that struck with precision, piercing through the attacker's defenses. 2 of them fell, but the third managed to avoid the worst of it, hands already forming new gestures. The air around them grew heavy with electricity. Percy. Annabeth's voice cut through the chaos. She was running toward him, dagger in hand, her shirt torn and a gash bleeding on her arm. The distraction cost him. Lightning erupted from the attacker's fingertips, not toward Percy but toward Annabeth. There wasn't time to think, only react. Percy threw himself into the path of the attack, bracing for pain. It never came. A wall of water materialized before him, but this wasn't his doing. This water moved with purpose and power beyond anything Percy had ever commanded, absorbing the lightning completely. At the same time, a blinding golden light flooded the battlefield. So intense that Percy had to shield his eyes. When he could see again, 2 new figures stood between him and the attackers. One was instantly recognizable, Poseidon, his father, trident raised and sea-green eyes blazing with fury. But the other, the woman beside Poseidon, radiated light like a second sun, her flowing robes shimmering between white and gold, her face beautiful and terrible in its radiance. Long black hair floated around her as though underwater, despite the absence of water. In her hands, she held a mirror that reflected not the scene before them, but flames that seemed to burn with the intensity of a star. Amaterasu, one of the attackers whispered, the first sign of emotion Percy had heard from any of them, fear. The radiant woman's eyes narrowed. You dare breach the covenant, shinobi. You dare attack what is protected. Her voice resonated with power, each word carrying the weight of divine authority. The mirror in her hands tilted slightly, and sunlight concentrated into a beam that struck the attacker who had spoken. There was no scream, no dramatic display. The masked figure simply ceased to exist, reduced to ash in an instant. Poseidon stepped forward, his trident pulsing with sea-green energy. The dimensional boundaries were clear. Your world has violated the accords. The accords were broken the moment you hid the bridge, child, replied one of the remaining attackers. Though Percy noted a distinct tremor in their voice. The convergence cannot be prevented. Our master merely hastens what was already coming. Poseidon's expression darkened further. Your master plays with forces beyond his comprehension. The sea god thrust his trident into the ground, and the earth responded immediately. Not just with an earthquake as Percy had seen his father create before, but with something more complex. The ground beneath the attackers glowed with symbols similar to those on their scroll, but vastly more intricate. Return to your dimension, Poseidon commanded. Tell your master that the child remains under our protection. The next breach will not be met with mercy. The masked figures exchanged glances, then formed identical hand signs. In puffs of smoke, they vanished. Only then did Percy notice the eerie silence that had fallen over Camp Half-Blood. The battle had stopped everywhere, all eyes drawn to the divine figures standing on Half-Blood Hill. Amaterasu turned, her radiance dimming slightly as she looked at Percy. Her eyes, golden as the sun itself, widened with an emotion Percy couldn't quite identify. Recognition, relief, whatever it was quickly masked behind divine composure. Perseus Jackson, she said, his name flowing from her lips like a melody. You have begun to awaken. What's happening? Percy demanded, looking between her and his father. Who were those people? What did they mean about me being a bridge? Poseidon's expression softened as he looked at his son. The time for secrets has passed sooner than we hoped. He glanced at the camp around them, where injured demigods were being tended to, buildings smoldered, and confusion reigned. But this is not the place for such revelations. Annabeth had reached Percy's side, her calculating gaze moving between the 2 deities. Lord Poseidon, she acknowledged with a respectful nod, then turned uncertain eyes to Amaterasu. And, I am Amaterasu Omikami, the radiant goddess replied, inclining her head slightly, the great goddess who shines in the heavens. A Japanese goddess, Annabeth whispered, her encyclopedic knowledge kicking in despite the chaos. But that's impossible. Different pantheons don't interact. Amaterasu's lips curved in a slight smile. Child of Athena, the universe contains more mysteries than even your mother has catalogued. Chiron approached, bowing deeply to both deities. Lord Poseidon, Lady Amaterasu. I feared this day would come. You knew? Percy asked, a sense of betrayal cutting through his confusion. The centaur's ancient eyes held sorrow. I knew only that you were special beyond your Olympian heritage, Percy. The details were kept from me for your protection. Well, that protection just got a lot of people hurt, Percy said, gesturing to the wounded campers. Poseidon stepped forward, placing a hand on Percy's shoulder. The attack would have come regardless. Indeed, it would have been far worse without the preparations we made. What preparations? What's going on? Percy demanded again, shrugging off his father's hand. The new energy he'd felt during the battle still hummed beneath his skin, making him feel simultaneously powerful and vulnerable. Amaterasu and Poseidon exchanged a look charged with unspoken communication. The camp is no longer safe, Amaterasu said finally. The dimensional barriers have been compromised. More will come. Then we'll defend it, Percy insisted. Like we always do. Not against this enemy, Poseidon said grimly. Those were merely scouts, shinobi of modest ability. If their masters come next. Shinobi, Annabeth repeated. Like ninjas. A simplification, but essentially correct, Amaterasu nodded. From a world parallel to your own. Where chakra, not godly power, shapes reality. Percy felt that strange energy pulse inside him again at the word, chakra. That's what I felt during the battle. This, chakra. But how? Why me? The two deities shared another loaded glance before Poseidon sighed, a sound like waves retreating from shore. Because, Percy, his father said, while I am indeed your father, you were also adopted by Amaterasu at the moment of your birth. The words landed like physical blows. Percy staggered back a step, looking between the two divine beings. That's not possible. 17 years ago, Amaterasu began. Her voice gentle but unyielding, a rare convergence occurred between our dimensions. The boundaries thinned, allowing limited passage. During this time, a prophecy was revealed, one that spanned both worlds. A child born of water would stand at the crossroads of worlds, Poseidon continued. A bridge between dimensions, capable of wielding both divine ichor and chakra. Percy's mind raced to process this information. So what? You both decided to make me your science experiment. No, Amaterasu's voice was sharp. We sought to protect you. A child with one foot in each world would be hunted by those who fear the prophecy. We sealed away your chakra network, leaving only your demigod abilities active. But the seal has begun to fail, Poseidon added. The new convergence approaches, stronger than the last. Your true nature is awakening, and our enemies have sensed it. Percy looked around at the damaged camp, at his injured friends being treated by Apollo campers. All this destruction, all this pain, because of him. Because of something he never knew about himself. I didn't ask for any of this, he said quietly. No hero ever does, Chiron said gently. Annabeth took Percy's hand, her grip firm despite her own injuries. Whatever this is, Percy, we'll face it together. Like always. Percy wanted to draw strength from her touch, but the weight of revelation was too heavy. He pulled his hand away, needing space to think. The shinobi who attacked, they called me a dimensional anchor. Said I needed to be severed. Amaterasu nodded solemnly. There are those who belly. Eve the prophecy foretells destruction, the collapse of the boundaries between worlds. They seek to prevent this by eliminating you. And what do you believe the prophecy means? Percy challenged. We believe, Poseidon said carefully, that you represent hope, a chance for harmony between realms that have existed in isolation for millennia. Percy laughed bitterly. Right, because Greeks are so known for harmonious relationships with other pantheons. There is much you do not understand, Amaterasu said, not unkindly. About your heritage, about the nature of the multiverse, about the power growing within you. Then help me understand, Percy demanded. No more secrets. Before either deity could respond, the air around them began to shimmer, the same effect Percy had experienced during his hallucinations. But this time, everyone could see it. Reality itself seemed to warp and thin. The aftershocks of the barrier breach, Poseidon said urgently. We must leave this place. Now. Leave. Percy echoed. I'm not abandoning camp. The camp must be evacuated regardless, Chiron said, his expression grave. The magical boundaries are compromised. All demigods must return to Th. Immortal world until we can restore protections. And Percy? Annabeth asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Must come with us, Amaterasu said, her tone brooking no argument. To a place between worlds. Where we can begin his training before the convergence arrives. Percy looked around desperately. Everything was falling apart too quickly. His world, already complicated enough, as a demigod, had just expanded in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. How long? He asked finally. The convergence will reach its peak in 3 months, Poseidon answered. By then, you must be prepared to fulfill your role, whatever that may be. 3 months, Percy repeated numbly. He turned to Annabeth, whose gray eyes were calculating, already adapting to this new reality. I need to talk to Annabeth. Alone. The two deities exchanged glances again, then nodded in unison. Briefly, Amaterasu conceded. But time grows short. The next attack will come soon, and it will be stronger. As the gods stepped away to confer with Chiron about evacuation plans, Percy pulled Annabeth toward the remains of Talia's pine. The great tree had survived, though its branches were scorched from the battle. This is insane, Percy said once they were relatively private. Japanese gods, parallel dimensions, chakra. Annabeth's brow furrowed in concentration. Actually, there have always been theories about multiple pantheons existing simultaneously. The ancient cultures had contact with each other, trading stories and beliefs. What if they weren't just stories? Not helping, Percy groaned. Sorry, she said, reaching for his hand again. This time, he didn't pull away. It's just. This explains some things, doesn't it? Your hallucinations. And during the battle, I saw you do things with water that you've never done before. Percy flexed his free hand, feeling that strange energy, chakra, moving beneath his skin like an underground current alongside his familiar demigod powers. I felt different, stronger, but also like I wasn't fully in control. He met her eyes. What if they're right? What if I am some kind of dimensional bridge? What does that even mean? Annabeth squeezed his hand. It means what it always means when we get thrown into something bigger than ourselves. We adapt, we learn, we fight, but this time I might have to do it without you. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Annabeth's expression tightened, but she nodded slowly. If they're taking you somewhere between dimensions, I can't follow. Not yet, anyway. A determined gleam entered her eyes. But that doesn't mean I'm sitting this out. While you're training with divine chakra or whatever, I'll research everything I can about dimensional convergences, Japanese mythology, this chakra energy, everything. There has to be precedent, historical accounts, something we can use. Percy managed a smile despite everything. Of course you'd approach the collapse of reality as a research project. Better than panicking, she replied with a hint of her usual sharpness. Besides, it sounds like you're going to need all the information you can get. Percy glanced back at where the two gods waited, radiating impatience despite their outward composure. I don't trust this, any of it. Neither do I, Annabeth admitted. But we don't have much choice right now. Camp is compromised. Those shinobi will be back. You need to understand what's happening to you, and quickly. She was right, as usual. Percy hated it. 3 months, he said, trying to inject confidence he didn't feel into his voice. I'll master whatever this is, stop the convergence, save both worlds, and be back in time for the summer fireworks. Annabeth's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll hold you to that, seaweed brain. She leaned forward and kissed him briefly. And Percy, don't let them change who you are. God-adopted dimensional bridge or not, you're still you. With that small comfort, Percy returned to where the gods waited. Camp Half-Blood bustled with evacuation activity around them. Demigods gathering emergency supplies, treating wounds, and preparing to disperse into the mortal world until the sanctuary could be secured again. I'm ready, Percy told the deities, though nothing could have been further from the truth. Poseidon nodded approvingly. The sacred realm awaits. There, between dimensions, we can teach you to harness both aspects of your heritage. Will I be able to contact my friends? My mom? Percy asked, suddenly realizing the full implications of leaving. Time flows differently in the sacred realm, Amaterasu said, her golden eyes sympathetic but unyielding. But we will find ways for you to maintain connections. Your mortal ties are part of your strength. It wasn't the answer Percy wanted, but it was better than nothing. He took a deep breath and nodded. Before we depart, Poseidon said, there is one matter that must be addressed. He turned toward the gathered campers, his voice carrying across the hillside. Hear me, children of the gods. What you witnessed today is but a harbinger of what comes. The dimensional barriers weaken, ancient covenants fray. Olympus must prepare, Amaterasu continued, her radiance intensifying. As must all pantheons across all worlds. The great convergence approaches, a time when all realities draw near. When the veils between worlds thin to transparency. Percy watched as the campers listened with expressions ranging from confusion to terror. Even Clarice, bloodied but unbowed from the battle, looked shaken by the divine pronouncement. A council will convene, Poseidon declared. Olympian and others. Chiron will represent Camp Half-Blood's interests. Prepare yourselves, heroes. The sea-oming struggle transcends the conflicts you have known. With those ominous words hanging in the air, Amaterasu raised her sacred mirror. Sunlight reflected from its surface, but instead of blinding those nearby, it seemed to fold reality itself, creating an opening in the air, a doorway of pure light. Come, Perseus, she said gently. Your journey begins. Percy looked back at his friends one last time. Annabeth stood tall despite her injuries, her eyes conveying everything words couldn't. Grover had appeared sometime during the evacuation and gave him a trembling thumbs up. Chiron bowed his head in solemn farewell. Then Percy stepped through the doorway of light, his divine parents following behind him. The portal closed, reality sealing itself once more, leaving Camp Half-Blood behind. The sacred realm defied description. It wasn't so much a place as a state of being, a location that existed in the overlapping margins of multiple realities. Light behaved strangely here, casting multi-ple shadows from objects as though several suns shone from different worlds. The ground beneath Percy's feet felt solid enough, but it rippled occasionally like disturbed water, revealing glimpses of other landscapes far below. Where are we exactly? Percy asked, fighting vertigo as he watched clouds from another world pass beneath what should have been solid ground. The crossroads, Poseidon replied. A neutral territory existing in the interstices between dimensions. Few can enter, fewer still can navigate its pathways. The Japanese call it Yomatsu Hirosaka, the slope that leads to the underworld, Amaterasu added. Greeks named it the crossroads of Hecate. Romans, the liminal threshold. All describe the same reality, the place where worlds touch. Percy tried to take it all in. The landscape shifted subtly as they walked. Sometimes resembling a Greek temple, other times transforming into what looked like a Japanese shrine, before shifting again to something entirely alien. The ONLY constant was a massive tree in the distance, larger than any Percy had ever seen, its branches seeming to extend into different dimensions. What's that? He asked, pointing to the impossible tree. Yggdrasil, the world tree. Askr Yggdrasil. The divine tree. Amaterasu listed names in succession. Another multiversal constant, a physical manifestation of the connections between realities. That's where we're headed, Poseidon explained. The heart of the crossroads, where we can begin your training in earnest. As they approached the colossal tree, Percy noticed structures built among its low branches and roots, buildings that somehow incorporated elements of many different architectural styles while remaining harmonious. Figures moved among these structures, some clearly human, others decidedly not. Who are they? Percy asked. Guardians of the crossroads, Amaterasu replied. Some mortal, some divine, all sworn to maintain the balance between worlds. You will meet them soon enough. Percy felt overwhelmed. Just hours ago, his biggest concern had been his strange hallucinations. Now he was walking through a dimension between dimensions, guided by two gods who claimed to be his parents. Toward a tree that apparently connected all of reality. I still don't understand, he said finally. Why me? Why create a bridge child at all? Poseidon and Amaterasu exchanged one of our meaningful glances before the sea god sighed. The truth, Percy, is that we did not create the bridge. You were already born with the potential, a rare soul capable of resonating with multiple dimensional frequencies. We merely ensured you would survive to fulfill your destiny. By adopting me, across pantheons, Amaterasu nodded. Divine adoption is more than ceremony. It reshapes the essence of the adoptee, granting aspects of the adopting deity's nature. When Poseidon sired you, you were already unique. When I adopted you through ancient rites, you became something unprecedented, a being of both ichor and chakra. But why seal away part of me? Why not tell me the truth from the beginning? Because, Poseidon said grimly, there are those who would destroy any bridge between worlds. Those who believe separation is the natural order. Like those masked attackers, the shinobi. They serve a greater power. Amaterasu's voice hardened. One who once attempted to claim godhood in my realm, who was cast down and banished. We believed him destroyed, but it seems he found alternative methods of survival. They had reached the base of the world tree now. Up close, its trunk was wide enough that Percy estimated it would take 20 people holding hands to encircle it. The bark swirled with patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them, occasionally revealing glimpses of other worlds, a desert city, an ocean with two moons, a mountain range that floated in the sky. Welcome to Yggdrasil Haven, Poseidon announced as they approached an opening in the trunk that served as a gateway to the settlement built within and around the tree. Figures appeared at the entrance, guards of some kind, though they were unlike any Percy had seen before. One appeared, human except for the 6 arms folded across his chest, each hand gripping a different weapon. The other had the lower body of a serpent and skin that shifted colors like a chameleon. Lord Poseidon, Lady Amaterasu. The 6-armed guard bowed deeply. The council awaits your arrival. His eyes, all 3 of them, fixed on Percy with open curiosity. This is the bridge child. This is my son, Poseidon corrected firmly. Perseus Jackson. The guards bowed to Percy, which made him deeply uncomfortable. Just Percy is fine, he said awkwardly. Names have power here. Percy Jackson, the serpent-bodied guard cautioned. Offer yours cautiously. Percy glanced questioningly at his divine parents, but they merely gestured for him to follow as they proceeded through the gateway into the heart of Yggdrasil Haven. Inside, the settlement was even more remarkable. The interior of the tree was hollow, creating a vast chamber with buildings constructed along the inner walls, connected by bridges and staircases that defied conventional physics. Light filtered through the bark in strange patterns, illuminating the bustling activity of the haven's inhabitants, a diverse collection of beings from what Percy now understood were different dimensions. Some appeared human or humanoid, while others were clearly not. Percy spotted what looked like centaurs, but with feline instead of equine lower bodies. Beings of living flame conversed with creatures seemingly composed of pure shadow. In one corner, what appeared to be a normal human woman practiced forms that caused the air around her to shimmer and distort. Are they all from different worlds? Percy asked, struggling to find appropriate terminology. Different dimensions, different timelines, different realities, Amaterasu confirmed. All with a purpose here at the crossroads. They ascended a spiraling staircase that wound around the inner circumference of the tree trunk, passing various levels of the settlement. Percy noticed that the inhabitants gave Poseidon and Amaterasu a wide berth, bowing respectfully but maintaining distance. They fear you, he observed. They respect the power we represent, Poseidon corrected. Ajor deities seldom visit the haven directly. Our presence suggests significant events, which your arrival certainly qualifies as, came a new voice from above them. Percy looked up to see a figure descending toward them, not via the stairs, but floating gently through the air. As the newcomer drew closer, Percy struggled to focus on their appearance. It seemed to shift constantly, as though multiple people occupied the same space simultaneously, sometimes appearing as an elderly man with a long beard, other times as a woman with stars in her hair, occasionally as something entirely non-human. Kronos. Amaterasu greeted the being with a respectful inclination of her head. Percy tensed at the name, his hand instinctively moving toward Riptide. Not your enemy Kronos, young Bridge, the being said, apparently noticing Percy's reaction. Different spelling, different entity entirely. I am Kronos, guardian of temporal boundaries. Time god, Percy guessed. Time observer, Kronos corrected. Their form settling momentarily into that of a middle-aged person of indeterminate gender. The council chambers are prepared. The representatives have arrived, though some more grudgingly than others. Representatives, Percy asked. The Dimensional Council, Poseidon explained. Leaders from various realms who maintain the covenants between worlds. They must be informed of your awakening and the coming convergence. Percy felt a spike of anxiety. So I'm what? Going to be put on trial? Not trial, Amaterasu said firmly. But scrutiny, certainly. Your existence challenges many long-held beliefs about the separation of realms. They had reached the uppermost level of the settlement, where a large structure dominated the crown of the tree. Unlike the eclectic architecture below, T.'s building maintained a perfect balance between various styles, part Greek temple, part Japanese shrine, part structures Percy couldn't identify, all flowing seamlessly together. The Hall of Convergence, Kronos announced, gesturing toward the massive doors carved with symbols from countless pantheons and realities. Where the fate of worlds has been decided since time immemorial. The doors swung open silently, revealing a circular chamber within. The ceiling opened to a sky that couldn't possibly exist, filled with stars that formed constellations Percy had never seen, and multiple moons of different colors. Around a circular table sat 12 figures, each radiating power in distinct ways. Percy recognized Zeus immediately. His father's brother looked distinctly uncomfortable in this setting. The master bolt clutched tightly in one hand. Beside him sat a woman in flowing white robes whom Percy guessed was Hera, though she seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than when he'd encountered her previously. The other 10 figures were unknown to him, though each commanded presence in their own way. A man with blue skin and multiple arms. A woman whose hair moved like living flame. A Bine. G composed entirely of shadow except for gleaming golden eyes. Others less humanoid, including what appeared to be a massive fox with 9 tails, somehow scaled down to sit at the table. The bridge arrives, announced Kronos, their voice reverberating with unnatural harmonics. All eyes turned to Percy, who fought the urge to shrink under such scrutiny. These weren't just powerful beings, they were representatives of entire realities. Entire systems of existence. Step forward, Perseus Jackson, commanded a voice from the head of the table. There sat a figure Percy hadn't noticed initially, a man whose appearance seemed to include elements of every culture represented, her features shifting subtly moment to moment. I am Convergence, embodiment of the crossroads. This council convenes at my behest. Percy stepped forward, intensely aware of Poseidon and Amaterasu flanking him protectively. So this is the abomination, said the 9-tailed fox, its voice a growl that reverberated through Percy's chest. The one who would collapse the boundaries. Mind your tongue, Kurama, Amaterasu warned, her radiance intensifying. You address my adopted son. The fox, Kurama, bared massive teeth. In what might have been a smile or a threat. Your presumption in crossing pantheon lines is precisely why we are here, sun goddess. Enough. Convergence raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. We are not here to cast blame, but to address reality. The great convergence approaches, faster than anticipated. The dimensional boundaries weaken, and now, the bridge child awakens. The timing is suspicious, noted the blue-skinned, multi-armed figure. The forbidden adoption, the accelerated convergence, it suggests interference. Are you accusing us of manipulating cosmic forces, Vishnu? Poseidon's voice was dangerously calm. The way the sea grows still before a hurricane. I merely observe the correlation, Vishnu replied smoothly. Though others might draw more definitive conclusions. Perhaps we should ask the child himself, suggested the woman with flame-like hair. Her voice carried the crackling of fire within it. He stands before us, yet we speak as if he were merely an object. Percy felt a surge of gratitude toward the fiery woman. Thank you, he said, finding his voice at last. And yes, I'd like to know what exactly everyone thinks I'm going to do. Because until about 3 hours ago, I thought I was just a regular demigod trying to survive monster attacks in high school. A ripple of reactions passed around the table: surprise, amusement, skepticism. He doesn't know, murmured the shadow being. Fascinating. Know what? Percy demanded, frustration building. Everyone keeps talking about prophecies and convergences and bridges, but no one will tell me what any of it actually means. Because they fear your reaction, said Zeus unexpectedly, speaking for the first time. They fear that if you understand your true potential, you might choose to use it. Brother, Poseidon warned, but Zeus continued. The prophecy speaks not merely of a bridge between worlds, but of one who could reshape them entirely. Zeus fixed Percy with his electric blue gaze. One with the power to tear down the barriers permanently, or reinforce them forever. That's not possible, Percy said, though even as he spoke, he felt that dual energy within him pulse in response. I'm just one person standing at the nexus of all realities, Convergence said gently. The prophecy was clear. When sea embraces sun beyond the veil, a child of convergence shall prevail. Neither wholly one world nor the other, but born of first and claimed by another. At the cusp when all realities align, the bridge shall determine the new design. Separation eternal or union complete. The multiverse bows at the bridge's feet. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Percy felt dizzy trying to process their meaning. You think I'm going to, what? Decide the fate of all reality? Not think, Kurama growled. No, which is why some believe you should not exist at all. The dimensional accords were clear, the shadow being added. No interference between pantheons. No crossbreeding of power systems. The adoption ritual violated our most sacred covenant. A covenant created after the last convergence nearly destroyed all our realms, Amaterasu countered. A covenant meant to prevent catastrophe, not ensure it. The prophecy would have found another vessel without your interference, Vishnu argued. Perhaps, Poseidon acknowledged, but would that vessel have been raised with the values needed to make the right choice when the time comes? Or would they have been corrupted by the power, tempted to reshape reality for their own benefit? And you believe your son is above such temptation? Kurama scoffed. Percy had heard enough. I never asked for any of this. He shouted, his frustration boiling over. I didn't ask to be born a demigod. I didn't ask to be adopted across pantheons, and I certainly didn't ask to be some cosmic deciding vote on whether realities should mix or stay separate. To his surprise, his outburst silenced the council. Even more surprising was the small smile that appeared on Convergence's ever-shifting face. And that, she said softly, is precisely why you were chosen. Before Percy could respond, the chamber shuddered violently. The multiple moons visible through the ceiling flickered like faulty light bulbs, and the air grew thick with static electricity. Boundary breach, called Chronos, their form flickering rapidly between appearances. Massive disturbance at the eastern nexus. The council members rose as one, power radiating from them in palpable waves. It would seem, Convergence said grimly, that our enemies have found the haven sooner than anticipated. How is that possible? Demanded Zeus. The crossroads is hidden from all realms. Unless someone is guiding them, Vishnu suggested. His many eyes narrowing. Accusations can wait, Poseidon declared. Defense takes priority. Convergence nodded. Guardians to your stations. Secure the boundaries. Her gaze fell on Percy. The bridge must be protected at all costs. The council dispersed in various displays of power. Zeus vanishing in a crack of lightning, Kurama simply fading from view, others using methods of transportation Percy couldn't begin to comprehend. Come, Amaterasu placed a hand on Percy's shoulder. We must get you to the heart chamber. Wait, Percy resisted. What's happening? Who's attacking? The same forces that struck your camp, Poseidon explained hurriedly. But in far greater numbers, with far greater purpose. Another violent shudder ran through the structure. Through the open doors of the chamber, Percy could see chaos erupting in the levels below. Inhabitants of the haven rushing to defensive positions, barriers of light and energy forming around vulnerable areas. I can fight, Percy insisted. I've been in battles before. Not like this, Amaterasu said firmly. You've only just begun to access your chakra. You're not ready to face shinobi of this caliber. Before Percy could argue further, a deafening explosion rocked the entire haven. The tree itself seemed to groan in pain, and through the ceiling opening, Percy saw one of the strange moons crack like glass. "They've breached the primary barrier," Poseidon said, his expression grim. "Unprecedented. The heart chamber," Amaterasu insisted. Now, they hurried from the council room and down a corridor Percy hadn't noticed before. Behind them, sounds of battle erupted, shouts in languages Percy didn't recognize, explosions of energy, the clash of weapons. "What's the heart chamber?" Percy asked as they ran. "The center of Yggdrasil," Poseidon explained. "The point where all dimensional threads converge. The most protected location in the haven, and the place where your training must begin immediately." "Training? Now? While everyone's fighting? Especially now," Amaterasu said. "The attack is no coincidence. Our enemies move faster than anticipated. The convergence itself accelerates. You must learn to harness both aspects of your heritage, quickly." They reached what appeared to be a dead end, but Amaterasu placed her hand on the living wood of the tree. The surface rippled like water, revealing a hidden passage that spiraled downward into the depths of Yggdrasil. "Quickly," she urged. As they descended the spiraling passage, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by a deep, rhythmic pulsing, like a massive heartbeat. The air grew thick with energy, making Percy's skin tingle and both his divine ichor and newly awakened chakra respond in kind. The passage opened into a spheric chamber that defied Percy's understanding of physics. The room existed somehow both inside and outside the tree simultaneously, with views of countless realities visible through what seemed like windows or portals along the walls. At the center floated a pulsing orb of pure energy, neither light nor matter, but something in between. "The heart of Yggdrasil," Poseidon said reverently. "The dimensional nexus point. It's beautiful," Percy admitted, mesmerized by the shifting patterns within the orb. "And dangerous," Amaterasu cautioned. "What you see is raw possibility, the stuff from which realities are woven. Few can approach it safely. But I can. You must," Poseidon said. "Your training begins here, with understanding what you truly are." Percy tore his gaze from the hypnotic orb to look at his divine parents. "And what am I, exactly?" "A bridge," Amaterasu said simply. "A being capable of channeling and harmonizing energies that should, by all natural laws, destroy each other upon contact. Divine ichor and chakra exist as opposing forces in the multiverse," Poseidon explained. "One flows from the immortal essence of deities, passing fractionally to their descendants. The other emerges from the life force of mortals, refined through physical and spiritual training. Yet you contain both," Amaterasu continued. "The ichor of Poseidon by birth, the chakra network of my pantheon by adoption. Two energy systems that have never successfully coexisted in a single vessel, until you." Percy tried to process this information, feeling both energies stirring within him as if in response to the explanation. "The shinobi who attacked Camp Half-Blood," he said slowly. "They used chakra, didn't they? That's how they manipulated elements without being demigods." "Yes," Amaterasu nodded. "In their world, chakra is the foundation of all techniques, what they call jutsu. It allows them to manipulate natural elements, create illusions, enhance physical abilities, and much more. And now I can do that too, along with my demigod abilities." "In theory," Poseidon said. "But the energies must be balanced carefully. Uncontrolled, they could tear you apart from within." Another distant explosion rocked the chamber, causing the portals around them to flicker momentarily. "We have little time," Amaterasu said urgently. "The haven's defenses are strong, but our enemies are determined. You must begin to harmonize your dual nature immediately." "How?" Percy asked, anxiety and determination mingling in equal measure. "Approach the heart," Poseidon instructed. "Let it reveal your true nature to you." Percy hesitated only briefly before stepping toward the pulsing orb at the center of the chamber. As he drew closer, both energies within him responded more strongly, his familiar demigod powers surging like the tide, while the newer chakra energy spiraled through pathways he was only beginning to sense. "What do I do?" he asked, stopping an arm's length from the orb. "Touch it," Amaterasu said. "But be prepared, it will show you not just who you are, but who you might become." Percy reached out slowly, his hand trembling slightly. As his fingertips made contact with the orb, energy surged through him like an electrical current. His vision whited out, replaced by a cascade of images, himself standing on a battlefield, commanding water and fire simultaneously, moving with inhuman speed and precision. Camp Half-Blood and what appeared to be a village with that same mountain of carved faces, existing side by side as denizens of both worlds moved freely between them. A dark figure with eyes that shifted between golden and red, wielding a scythe wreathed in black flames. Annabeth fighting alongside a red-haired woman in battle gear, both protecting a tear in reality from shadowy creatures. Himself again, older, standing at a massive version of the orb he now touched, making a choice that sent ripples across countless dimensions. The visions came faster, more chaotic, until Percy could no longer distinguish individual scenes. Through it all, he felt his dual energies responding, no longer as separate forces but merging, harmonizing, creating something entirely new within him. When the visions finally ceased, Percy found himself on his knees, gasping for breath. Both Poseidon and Amaterasu stood nearby, watching him with expressions of concern and wonder. What did I just see? Percy managed between breaths. Possibilities, Amaterasu said softly. Futures that may come to pass, depending on the choices made. Did you see him? Poseidon asked urgently. The enemy. Percy nodded. The image of those shifting eyes burned into his memory. Who is he? The divine parents exchanged grave looks. We feared as much, Amaterasu said. He calls himself Madara now. But once he was known as Kronos. That's impossible, Percy objected. They're from different pantheons, different worlds. As are your divine parents, Poseidon reminded him. What you experienced, divine adoption across pantheons, we were not the first to attempt it. After the last convergence, Amaterasu explained, when the dimensional barriers were at their weakest. Kronos found a way to project his essence into my world. There, he attached himself to a powerful shinobi named Madara Uchiha, who sought godhood through forbidden techniques. The result was an abomination, Poseidon continued grimly. A hybrid entity possessing both the divine power of a titan and the chakra mastery of one of the strongest shinobi to ever live. We believed the fusion destroyed them both, Amaterasu said. The conflicting energies should have annihilated their shared consciousness. But it seems they found a way to survive, by remaining dormant, allowing the energies to gradually harmonize over centuries. Just like what's happening to me, Percy realized with growing horror. No, Poseidon said firmly. What they did was a perversion, a forced fusion of unwilling consciousnesses. What you are is natural harmony, two energies that coexist by birthright. Another explosion, closer this time, shook the chamber violently. Several of the reality portals flickered and died, while others showed scenes of battle erupting across different sections of the haven. They're getting closer, Amaterasu said, her radiance intensifying with obvious concern. We need more time, Poseidon insisted. He's only just begun to understand. Time is the one thing we lack, Amaterasu replied grimly. She turned to Percy, who had regained his feet. Percy, what you experienced with T. He heart was meant to be the beginning of a lengthy training process. Instead, it must serve as the catalyst. Your dual energies have been awakened and shown the path to harmony. Now you must accelerate what should take months to master. How? Percy asked, still reeling from the visions and revelations. Focus inward, she instructed. Find the two currents within you, the tide of ichor and the spiral of chakra. See how they move, how they interact. Percy closed his eyes, concentrating on the energies he could now clearly perceive within himself. The familiar pull of his demigod powers flowed like ocean currents through his veins. The newer chakra energy moved differently, more structured, flowing through specific channels throughout his body, connecting at 7 distinct points from his abdomen to the crown of his head. I can feel them, he said. They're circling each other, like they want to connect but can't quite figure out how. That's the natural resistance between energy systems, Poseidon explained. What you must do is create a bridge within yourself, just as you are a bridge between worlds. Imagine the point where wave meets shore, Amaterasu suggested. Neither fully sea nor fully land, but a place of constant exchange and balance. Percy concentrated on the metaphor, visualizing the two energies as ocean and land, seeking the shoreline where they could coexist. Gradually, he felt something shifting within him, the rigid separation beginning to blur, points of contact forming where the energies touched without conflict. It's working, he murmured. I can Feel them starting to. His words were cut short as the chamber door burst inward with explosive force. Through the smoke and debris stepped 3 figures, shinobi in the same style of masks as those who had attacked Camp Half-Blood, but radiating power on an entirely different level. "The Bridge Child," said the central figure, whose mask bore red and black swirling patterns. "Surrender him, and the haven may yet survive." Poseidon's trident materialized in his hand, crackling with sea-green energy. "You dare invade the sacred realm. The boundaries fall, sea god," replied the masked shinobi. "The convergence comes regardless of your wishes. Our master simply hastens the inevitable." "Your master perverts the natural order," Amaterasu countered, her mirror appearing before her, blazing with solar fire. "Leave now, or be reduced to ash." The 3 shinobi spread out in a practiced formation. Their hands moved in synchronized patterns, forming identical signs in rapid succession. "Forbi, D-Den technique. Divine suppression field," they called in unison. The air in the chamber grew heavy, thick with visible energy that formed a dome around them. Percy felt his divine powers immediately dampen, as though he were suddenly trying to manipulate water through a heavy cloth. Beside him, Poseidon and Amaterasu similarly tensed, their divine radiance dimming noticeably. "A sealing jutsu designed to suppress godly power," the lead shinobi explained, satisfaction evident in his voice despite the mask. "Developed specifically for this encounter." "You forget," Amaterasu said, her voice strained but defiant, "that I am worshipped in the shinobi world as well. My power comes from both realms." She raised her mirror, which still blazed, though less brightly than before. A beam of concentrated sunlight shot toward the shinobi, who dodged with inhuman speed. The beam struck one of the reality portals instead, shattering it and creating a swirling vortex of uncontained dimensional energy. The chamber descended into chaos. Poseidon, though weakened by the suppression field, still commanded enough power to engage one of the shinobi in direct combat, trident clashing against a strange Ak rod that absorbed divine energy on contact. Amaterasu battled the second attacker, her mirror creating flashes of blinding light that the shinobi countered with techniques that manipulated shadow itself. The lead shinobi turned his attention to Percy. "The bridge must be severed before completion." "Nothing personal, child. The stability of all worlds demands it." Percy drew Riptide, the familia. Our weight of the sword offering little comfort against an opponent who had helped subdue 2 major deities. As the shinobi approached, Percy felt both his energies responding to the threat, the dampened ichor and the still unfamiliar chakra. "I may not understand everything that's happening," Percy said, adopting a defensive stance, "but I know enough not to trust someone who attacks a neutral sanctuary and talks about severing me." The shinobi's hands blurred through a complex sequence of signs. Water style. Severing wave. A blade of high-pressure water shot toward Percy with lethal speed. Instinctively, he reached out with his demigod powers, attempting to take control of the water attack. Under normal circumstances, this would have been effortless. Within the suppression field, and against water infused with chakra, Percy managed only to deflect the blade slightly, enough that it cut across his shoulder instead of his throat. Pain lanced through him, but it triggered something a survival instinct that forced his dual energies into closer alignment. In that moment of desperate need, Percy felt the barrier between his ichor and chakra thin dramatically. Without conscious thought, his hands formed signs mimicking those he'd seen the shinobi use, while simultaneously he reached for the familiar pull of the sea in his gut. Water style. Tidal counterwave. The words came to his lips unbidden. Knowledge he hadn't possessed moments before suddenly accessible. Water erupted from Percy's outstretched hands, not pulled from an external source as his demigod powers would normally require, but generated through the chakra technique. Yet this water glowed with the same sea-green energy that typically accompanied his divine abilities, and moved with greater force than energy system alone could have produced. The shinobi visibly startled behind his mask, caught off guard by the hybrid technique. The counterwave slammed into him, throwing him back against the beer wall with enough force to crack the living wood of Yggdrasil. Percy stared at his hands in shock. What he'd just done should have been impossible, using chakra to create water, then infusing that created water with divine energy. Yet the evidence was undeniable as the shinobi struggled to his feet, his mask cracked and robe soaked. Impossible, the shinobi hissed. The energies cannot harmonize so quickly. The calculations. Maybe your calculations didn't account for something, Percy suggested, feeling a surge of confidence as the dual energies continued to align within him, responding to the immediate threat. Like me being really motivated not to get severed today. Across the chamber, both Poseidon and Amaterasu had registered what had happened, their expressions showing surprise and hope despite their ongoing battles. Percy, Poseidon called out, the heart. Use it to complete the harmonization. The lead shinobi's head snapped toward the pulsing orb at the center of the chamber. Seeming to realize its significance for the first time. Prevent him from reaching the nexus. He commanded his companions. At all costs, all three shinobi disengaged from their current battles, forming new hand signs in perfect synchronization. Combined technique. Dimensional anchor chains. From the broken reality portal, tendrils of pure dimensional energy shot forth, wrapping around Percy like glowing chains. He felt his body grow heavy, both energy systems once again forced apart by the foreign power. You cannot be allowed to fulfill the prophecy, the lead shinobi stated flatly. The worlds must remain separate. Order must be preserved. Percy struggled against the energy chains, but they only tightened in response. Across the chamber, Poseidon and Amaterasu renewed their attacks. But the shinobi had positioned themselves between the deities and Percy, intercepting each divine assault with specialized techniques. As his vision began to blur from the constricting pressure, Percy caught movement from one of the remaining reality portals. Through a window showing what appeared to be a forest clearing, he glimpsed a familiar figure, Annabeth, alongside a red-haired woman wearing a headband with a stylized leaf symbol. Just as in his vision, their eyes met across dimensional boundaries, and Percy saw Annabeth's expression shift from surprise to determination. She said something to her companion, who nodded and began forming hand signs similar to those the attacking shinobi had used. Hang on, seaweed brain, Annabeth's voice somehow reached him, distorted but recognizable. We're coming. The red-haired woman completed her technique, and the portal between dimensions widened. Together, Annabeth and the unknown Kunoichi leapt through, entering the heart chamber directly. Sakura. Now, Annabeth called to her companion. The woman, Sakura, slammed her fist into the ground with incredible force, sending shockwaves through the chamber that disrupted the shinobi's concentration. The dimensional chains around Percy flickered. Percy, Annabeth shouted, tossing something toward him, a small object that glinted bronze in the light of the heart. He caught eye-chi reflexively, a coin-sized disc inscribed with a complex pattern that combined Greek symbols with characters he didn't recognize. The harmonic seal, one of the shinobi cried in alarm. Stop him. Percy didn't hesitate. Operating on instinct and desperate trust in Annabeth, he pressed the disc against his chest, directly over his heart. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy coursed through him, not forcing his dual nature into alignment but rather creating the conditions where alignment could occur naturally. The dimensional chains shattered as Percy's ichor and chakra surged in response to the seal. No longer fighting each other but flowing together in a pattern that felt inexplicably right, as though they had always been meant to exist in harmony. Percy rose to his feet, power radiating from him in visible waves. Water formed around him without conscious effort, swirling in complex patterns that mimicked the flow of energy within him. His eyes glowed with a dual light, sea green from his demigod heritage, interwoven with the blue luminescence of activated chakra. How? Demanded the lead shinobi, backing away. That seal was theoretical, a hypothesis only. You're not he only ones with access to dimensional knowledge, Sakura replied, moving to stand beside Annabeth. Your master isn't the only one who can cross boundaries. Percy looked at Annabeth in amazement. How are you here? How did you know? Later, she promised, her gray eyes fierce with determination. Right now, we need to secure the heart and drive these assassins back. The three shinobi regrouped, their body language conveying uncertainty for the first time. The mission parameters have changed, the leader stated. We must report to the master. You're not going anywhere, Poseidon declared, moving to block their retreat. Amaterasu flanked them from the other side, her mirror blazing with renewed power. Trapped between two major deities, a newly harmonized dimensional bridge, and two unexpected interlopers. The shinobi made their decision. Their hands formed identical signs. Forbidden technique. Dimensional escape jutsu. Reality rippled around them, and despite the efforts of Poseidon and Amaterasu to prevent it, the three shinobi vanished, not teleporting within this dimension, but escaping to another entirely. The chamber fell silent except for the steady pulse of the heart. Percy felt the power from the harmonic seal spreading throughout his body, stabilizing the union of ichor and chakra into something sustainable. That was, he began, then faltered, unable to find words adequate to describe the experience. The beginning, Amaterasu said softly. Only the beginning. Percy turned to Annabeth and her companion, questions tumbling over each other in his mind. Annabeth crossed the chamber quickly and embraced him, unconcerned with the divine presence or the formality of the situation. I told you I wouldn't sit this out, she murmured against his chest. How did you even find me? Percy asked, returning the embrace despite his confusion. How did you cross dimensions? We had help, Annabeth said, gesturing to Sakura, who bowed respectfully to Poseidon and Amaterasu before approaching. Sakura Haruno, she introduced herself. Medical ninja of Konohagakure, and apparently, according to our intel, part of the same prophecy that involves you. Percy blinked in surprise. You're in the prophecy too? Not exactly, Sakura clarified. But the dimensional disturbances have been affecting our world as well. Lady Tsunade, our Hokage, received a message from. She glanced at Amaterasu respectfully, certain divine sources suggesting we might find answers here. We combined what we knew, Annabeth added. My research into dimensional convergences and Japanese mythology. Sakura's knowledge of chakra and sealing techniques. When the attack on the haven began, it created enough of a disturbance for us to track the dimensional coordinates. And the seal? Percy asked, touching the disc still attached to his chest. A collaborative effort, Sakura explained. Based on ancient texts from both our worlds that theorized the possibility of harmonizing divine ichor and chakra. No one believed it would actually work. The energies were considered fundamentally incompatible. Until you, Annabeth said, studying Percy with a mixture of scientific curiosity and personal concern. How do you feel? Percy took a moment to assess himself internally. The two energy systems that had been forcibly separated for his entire life now flowed together seamlessly. Enhancing rather than opposing each other. Complete, he said finally. Like I've been running on half power my whole life without realizing it. Poseidon approached, pride evident in his sea-green eyes that matched Percy's own. The harmonization that should have taken months of training, accomplished in moments of crisis. You continue to surprise us, son. The haven has been compromised, Amaterasu noted grimly, her attention briefly turning to the damaged chamber around them. We cannot remain here. Where will we go? Percy asked. Back to Camp Half-Blood. The camp remains vulnerable, Poseidon said. And your training has only just begun. You've achieved harmonization, but mastery of your dual nature will require time and guidance. Konoha, Sakura suggested. Our village is protected by ancient seals designed specifically to hide from divine detection. Lady Tsunade has already offered sanctuary. A shinobi village. Amaterasu considered the idea. It would provide the ideal environment for Percy to develop his chakra abilities, but remove him from sources of divine power necessary to strengthen his ichor, Poseidon countered. What about somewhere between? Percy suggested. You said earlier that I need to be the bridge. So maybe I should train where both worlds connect. The two deities exchanged thoughtful looks. The convergence points, Amaterasu said slowly. Places where our worlds naturally overlap, even when the dimensional barriers are strong. Mount Myoboku crosses both realms, Sakura offered. The toads have always straddled the boundary between mortal and divine. As does Delos in our world, Poseidon added. The floating island has occasionally been known to drift between dimensional boundaries. Then it's settled, Amaterasu declared. We shall establish a training sanctuary at the convergence point between Mount Myoboku and Delos. There, Percy can learn to fully master his dual heritage with teachers from both worlds. And what about the bigger problem? Percy asked. This Chronos Madara hybrid that's trying to accelerate the convergence. One step at a time, Poseidon counseled. First, you must master your powers. Then we can confront our enemy directly. We should go quickly, Annabeth urged. If those shinobi report back about the harmonization seal working, they'll send stronger forces next time. As if to emphasize her point, another distant explosion rocked the haven, followed by the sounds of renewed fighting. The heart pulsed more rapidly, as though responding to the danger. Annabeth is right, Amaterasu agreed. We must depart immediately. What about the haven? Percy asked, concerned for the diverse inhabitants he'd glimpsed earlier. What happens to everyone here? The haven has stood for millennia, Poseidon assured him. It will endure this attack. Convergence and the other guardians will see to the evacuation and eventual restoration. Amaterasu raised her mirror, which began to glow with golden light. I can create a pathway directly to the convergence point, but it will not go unnoticed. We may face resistance during transit. Then we'd better be ready, Percy said, feeling his harmonized powers respond eagerly to his resolve. As Amaterasu began the process of opening a dimensional pathway, Percy turned to Annabeth and Sakura. I still have about 1,000,000 questions, he told them. Starting with how you two even met. Annabeth smiled. It's quite a story. After you left with Poseidon and Amaterasu, I started researching dimensional convergences. Found some strange NCES in ancient texts about a hidden continent where people used life energy instead of divine power. Meanwhile, Sakura continued, our intelligence division detected unusual chakra patterns that didn't match any known shinobi technique. When I was assigned to investigate, I found her, a strange girl with a bronze knife, fighting off rogue ninja with strategies I'd never seen before. We figure out pretty quickly that we were both looking for the same thing, Annabeth added. Information about the convergence. About you. Percy felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude that Annabeth had, as always, refused to be sidelined. Curiosity about this new world of shinobi and chakra, and lingering concern about the prophecy that seemed to place him at the center of cosmic events. The golden light from Amaterasu's mirror intensified, forming a doorway similar to the one that had brought Percy to the haven from Camp Half-Blood. Through it, Percy could see a strange landscape, part Mediterranean island, part mystical mountain. The two realities overlapping and blending at their edges. It is time, Amaterasu announced. The path is open, but not for long. Percy took a deep breath, feeling the weight of recent revelations and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Yet alongside that weight was a new sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, the dual aspects of his nature existed in harmony rather than separation. Whatever challenges awaited in this convergence of worlds, he would face them as his complete self. With Annabeth beside him and his divine parents at his back, Percy stepped through the golden doorway toward his destiny as the bridge between worlds. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Tides of Destiny. The convergence point between Mount Myoboku and Delos defied conventional understanding of reality. Standing on a cliffside overlooking the training grounds, Percy watched as Mediterranean olive trees grew alongside giant mushrooms tall as buildings. Sacred Greek springs bubbled up next to pools filled with oil that the toad sages used for their techniques. The sky itself couldn't decide what color to be, shifting between the clear blue of the Aegean and the strange amber green of the Toad Mountain's atmosphere. 3 weeks had passed since their escape from Yggdrasil Haven. 3 weeks of the most intense training Percy had ever experienced. And yet he felt like he'd barely scratched the surface of what he needed to learn. Your stance is still too rigid, called a voice behind him. You're thinking like a swordsman, not a shinobi. Percy turned to see Sakura approaching. Her pink hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Despite her young age, only a year older than Percy himself, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen more battles than most veterans. Old habits, Percy admitted, relaxing the formal stance he'd unconsciously adopted. 15 years of Greek combat training is hard to unlearn. You don't need to unlearn it, Sakura corrected, demonstrating a more fluid posture. You need to integrate it. That's the whole point of harmonizing your energies, right? Finding the balance between demigod and shinobi. Percy nodded, mimicking her stance. Over the past weeks, he'd grown to respect Sakura's tactical mind and no-nonsense approach to training. She pushed him relentlessly but fairly, recognizing both his potential and his limitations. Try the water bullet technique again, she suggested. But this time, don't separate the processes. Don't think. First I form the hand signs, then I mold the chakra, then I release the jutsu. It should be one continuous flow, just like when you use your demigod powers instinctively. Percy took a deep breath, feeling the dual energies flowing through him. The harmonic seal Annabeth and Sakura had created remained on his chest, now a permanent part of him as it had fused with his skin, appearing as a circular tattoo that combined Greek symbols with shinobi script. It no longer actively forced his energies to cooperate, they did that naturally now, but it served as a stabilizing influence when he attempted more complex techniques. His hands moved through the required signs: tiger right pointing arrow, ox right pointing arrow, tiger right pointing arrow, rat. As they did, he focused on the water molecules in the air, pulling them together not just with chakra as a traditional shinobi would, but also with his innate connection to water as Poseidon's son. Water style. Water bullet jutsu. The technique manifested differently than when Sakura or the other shinobi instructors demonstrated it. Instead of a single calm, pressed sphere of water shooting forward, Percy's version created a swirling vortex that condensed into multiple smaller projectiles, each glowing with the faint sea-green energy that characterized his demigod powers. The water bullet struck the practiced target with precision, drilling through the reinforced material with ease, far more destructive than the standard technique should have been. Better, Sakura acknowledged, though her analytical gaze suggested she was already cataloging the differences for further study. You're still modifying the jutsu unconsciously. Your demigod instincts keep asserting control over the water, changing the chakra's shape manipulation. Is that bad? Percy asked, shaking water droplets from his fingers. Not bad, just different. She crossed her arms, considering. Most shinobi spend years developing their own personal style and variations of standard techniques. You're doing it automatically, creating hybrid techniques that draw on both energy systems. From the other side of the training ground came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Percy turned to see a young man about his age approaching, dark hair framing a handsome face set in a perpetual expression of mild disdain. Impressive, the newcomer said, voice dripping with sarcasm. You've mastered a technique Academy students learn at 12. Truly, the prophesied bridge between worlds is everything we hoped for. Percy felt his jaw tighten. Morning to you too, Shisui. Shisui Uchiha, cousin to the infamous Sasuke and Itachi, sent by the Hidden Leaf Village as both representative and instructor, had made his opinion of Percy abundantly clear from day one. In the Uchiha's eyes, Percy represented everything dangerous about the coming convergence: unpredictable power, divided loyalties, and a threat to the established order. Lord Fukasaku requests your presence at the sacred oil pool, Shisui informed them, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Apparently, your father has sent word from Olympus. Which father? Percy asked, unable to resist the jab. Something flickered in Shisui's eyes, annoyance perhaps, or just the faintest hint of his clan's legendary dujutsu threatening to activate. The one who lives underwater, not the one who burns things. Though I'm sure they're both equally proud of your tremendous progress with basic jutsu. Before Percy could retort, Sakura stepped between them. That's enough, Shisui. Save the rivalry for sparring sessions. Who's rivaling? Shisui raised an eyebrow. To be rivals, we'd need to be equals. With that parting shot, he turned and walked away. Posture perfect, every movement efficient in the way that came naturally to those born into shinobi clans. Don't let him get to you, Sakura advised once Shisui was out of earshot. The Uchiha have always been intense, especially about anything they perceive as a threat to their status. I don't care what he thinks, Percy muttered unconvincingly. I just don't get why he's even here if he hates me so much. Sakura's expression softened slightly. He doesn't hate you, Percy. He fears what you represent. The Uchiha have a complicated history with prophecies and divine power. And Shisui, he lost family during the Fourth Shinobi War. The idea of dimensional barriers breaking down, allowing gods and monsters to enter our world freely. It terrifies him, even if he'd never admit it. Percy considered this as they walked toward the sacred oil pool where the ancient toad sage Fukasaku made his home. It was easy to forget sometimes that the shinobi world had its own history of conflicts and tragedies, entirely separate from the divine wars Percy was familiar with. I'm not exactly thrilled about it either, he admitted. Being responsible for Heather worlds stay separated or merge permanently. No pressure there. Sakura glanced at him sideways. Is that what you're worried about? The prophecy. Among other things. Percy kicked at a stone, watching it skitter across the bizarre landscape where Greek and shinobi environments blended. Everyone has these expectations about what I'm supposed to do, but nobody seems to know exactly what that is. Even Poseidon and Amaterasu give me these cryptic non-answers whenever I ask direct questions. Gods are like that in any world, Sakura said with surprising bitterness. Even the ones who claim to care about humans. Before Percy could inquire further about that intriguing statement, they rounded a massive mushroom and the sacred oil pool came into view. The circular pool, filled with glistening liquid that wasn't quite water and wasn't quite oil, sat at the center of a natural amphitheater. Beside it stood the diminutive form of Fukasaku, ancient toad sage and one of Percy's primary instructors in chakra manipulation. Beside Fukasaku stood a woman Percy hadn't seen before. Tall and athletic, with sun-bronzed skin and hair the color of midnight that fell in a practical braid to her waist. She wore standard shinobi attire, dark pants, mesh armor beneath a fitted jacket, but with modifications that hinted at specialized function rather than standard issue. Most notably, she carried no visible weapons, which in Percy's experience usually meant someone was either exceptionally dangerous or exceptionally foolish. Given her confident stance and the respectful distance Fukasaku maintained, Percy guessed the former. "Ah, Percy boy," the ancient toad greeted him. "Right on time, right on time. We have a guest from Konohagakure with news from both your fathers." "Yes indeed." The woman studied Percy with open curiosity, her eyes a startling amber color that seemed to shift like sunlight through honey. She bowed formally, but there was something in her expression, a hint of amusement. Perhaps, that suggested the formality was performative rather than genuine. "Percy Jackson," she said, straightening from her bow. "The dimensional bridge. You're shorter than I expected." Percy blinked. Sorry to disappoint." She laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. "Not disappointed. Just observing. I'm Hikari Sento, Jonin of the Hidden Leaf and specialist in interdimensional transit techniques." "Interdimensional. What now?" Percy looked to Sakura for clarification. Hikari-sensei is one of the few shinobi who can travel between dimensional boundaries without external assistance, Sakura explained. Bowing respectfully to the older kunoichi. Her techniques were instrumental in establishing this training ground. "I'm also your new instructor," Hikari added casually, as though this were an insignificant detail. "Specifically for harmonizing your water nature techniques with your Greek abilities." Percy glanced between Fukasaku and Sakura. "I thought that's what we were already working on." "You've been working on fundamentals," Fukasaku explained, his bulbous eyes blinking slowly. "Basic chakra control, standard techniques, theoretical understanding. Now, it's time to develop your unique abilities." "Yes indeed." "Unique is right," Hikari commented, circling Percy with that same analytical gaze he'd grown accustomed to from his various instructors. Akra networks don't typically run with golden ichor instead of blue chakra. Your entire system is unprecedented. Story of my life, Percy muttered. Before we begin, Fukasaku interjected, there is news to discuss. Messages from Mount Olympus and from Takamagahara both. The ancient toad produced 2 scrolls, one bound in sea green ribbon bearing Poseidon's trident seal, the other wrapped in golden silk marked with Amaterasu's solar emblem. The divine councils have convened, Fukasaku said gravely. Following the attack on Yggdrasil Haven, both pantheons have acknowledged the accelerating convergence. Preparations have begun in both realms. Preparations for what exactly? Percy asked, taking the scrolls but not opening them yet. War, Hikari answered bluntly. Or salvation. Depends which gods you ask. Some believe the convergence represents opportunity, Fukasaku elaborated. A chance for cooperation, exchange of knowledge, mutual strengthening of both realms. And the others, Percy pressed. Believe it heralds destruction, Hikari continued. That the metaphysical foundations of each reality are incompatible. That forced convergence will result in both universes collapsing. And let me guess, they can't agree on which it is, so they're preparing for both. Fukasaku's webbed hand gestured toward the scrolls. Read for yourself, Percy boy. Each of your divine parents has specific instructions regarding your training. Percy broke the seal on Poseidon's message first, unrolling the parchment that smelled faintly of sea spray. His father's handwriting was flowing and ancient, like wave patterns etched into stone over centuries. Percy, the Olympian Council stands divided on the convergence. Zeus fears what he cannot control and advocates for strengthening the barriers at any cost. Athena seeks knowledge and proposes controlled exchange. Others vacillate between positions as they calculate advantage. I stand with Amaterasu in believing the prophecy speaks of balance, not destruction or dominance. Your training must reflect this balance. The harmonization of your dual nature is proceeding well, but time grows short. 3 signs have appeared that confirm our worst fears. Kronos has indeed merged with the Uchiha known as Madara. Their combined consciousness grows stronger daily as they master the same harmonization you now undergo. Unlike you, their fusion was forced and unnatural, but they have had centuries to stabilize it. Trust your instincts, Percy. The water responds to both aspects of your power because water itself exists in all realms, all dimensions. It is the universal constant, the perfect medium for a bridge between worlds. I have sent a gift with the Kunoichi Hikari, a trident forged in both divine flame and chakra-infused metal. It will help focus your harmonized abilities and serve as an anchor point when the convergence reaches its peak. Be wary of those who speak absolutely about separation or unification. The truth, as always, lies in the balance between extremes. Poseidon. Percy rolled the scroll closed, processing his father's words. A division among the gods was nothing new, but the scale of this conflict, spanning multiple pantheons and dimensions, was unprecedented even by the chaotic standards of divine politics. He opened Amaterasu's scroll next. Unlike Poseidon's flowing script, her message was written in precise, elegant characters that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Perseus, the shinobi world prepares for what many fear will be the 5th Great War. Not between hidden villages this time, but between realities. The 5 Kage stand united in their concern, though divided in approach. Some advocate sealing all dimensional breaches permanently, while others recognize the opportunity convergence represents. Your existence challenges fundamental assumptions about the separation between divine ichor and mortal chakra. This challenges those whose power depends on that separation remaining absolute. Be cautious of the Uchiha sent to train you. His clan's eyes can see the flow of chakra, but they are blind to divine ichor. This limitation frustrates him and may cloud his judgment regarding your potential. The coming days will bring difficult choices. You will be asked to demonstrate loyalty to one world or the other. Remember that as the bridge, your true loyalty must be to balance itself. I have infused Poseidon's gift with my divine flame. The trident will serve as both weapon and key, able to open pathways between realms when wielded by one who carries the essence of both. A final warning. Our enemy grows bold. Agents of the merged entity you faced at the Haven have been detected in multiple realms, gathering forbidden knowledge and ancient artifacts. They seek the dimensional keystone, an artifact from the previous convergence that could accelerate or redirect the cosmic alignment. Trust Hikari. She walks between worlds as you do, though by technique rather than nature. Her insight will prove invaluable. Amaterasu. Percy lowered the second scroll, feeling the weight of responsibility settling more heavily on his shoulders. So the gods are divided. The shinobi leaders are divided, and meanwhile this Kronos Madara hybrid is collecting magical artifacts to manipulate the convergence. Fantastic. That about sums it up, Hikari agreed, her casual tone belying the seriousness of the situation. Which is why we need to accelerate your training immediately. She glanced at the position of the sun. We have perhaps 2 months before T convergence reaches its critical phase. Based on the reports from our dimensional monitoring stations, the barriers are thinning faster than anticipated. 2 months. Percy's stomach dropped. The original timeline was 3 months. What changed? Fukasaku and Hikari exchanged glances. Our enemy has been busy. Yes indeed, the Toad Sage said gravely. The attacks on dimensional anchors points have increased. Each successful disruption accelerates the process. And they've been very successful, Hikari added grimly. 3 major nexus points destabilized in the past week alone. The Idenstone village now has a permanent dimensional tear floating above their cage tower, a window directly into what your people call the underworld. Percy winced. I'm guessing Hades isn't thrilled about that. About as thrilled as the Tsuchikage, Hikari confirmed. Diplomatic incidents across dimensional boundaries, not something anyone was prepared for. Sakura, who had remained silent during the scroll reading, finally spoke up. There's more, isn't there? Something specific happened to trigger this meeting. Hikari's expression tightened slightly. Perceptive as always, Sakura. Yes, there's been an incident directly related to Percy's training. She turned to face him fully. The gift from your divine parents, the trident I was supposed to deliver, was stolen during transit. Stolen, Percy repeated. By who? We believe agents of Chronos Madara, Fukasaku said. The ambush was precise, targeted. They knew exactly what I carried and when I would be most vulnerable crossing between dimensional boundaries. Percy noticed for the first time the bandages partially concealed beneath the Toad Sage's robe. You were injured. I am old but not helpless, Percy boy, Fukasaku said with a hint of pride. I escaped with my life, though not with the trident. But in the struggle, I managed to secure this. From within his robe, the ancient toad withdrew a small shard of metal that glowed with an inner light, pulsing between sea green and solar gold. A fragment broken from the trident during battle, he explained. Small, but containing the essence of the whole. Enough perhaps for our purposes. And what purposes are those? Percy asked. Hikari stepped forward. To create a new weapon, one attuned specifically to your unique energy signature. The trident was a powerful tool, but it was still created externally, by your divine parents. What you need is something that grows from your own harmonized nature. I already have a weapon, Percy said, touching Riptide in his pocket. And it's served me pretty well so far. Riptide is a fine sword, Fukasaku acknowledged. A powerful Greek weapon for a Greek demigod. But you are more than that now, yes indeed. You need a weapon that channels both aspects of your power. Percy considered this. Riptide had been his constant companion through countless battles. The familiar weight of the sword, its perfect balance, CE in his hand. These were comforts in an increasingly complex situation. But he couldn't deny the logic. If he truly needed to embrace both sides of his nature, perhaps his weaponry should reflect that. What exactly did you have in mind? He asked finally. Hikari smiled, a gleam of excitement in her amber eyes. That's where things get interesting. But we can't do it here. She glanced at Fukasaku. We need to take him to the Forge of Worlds. The ancient toad nodded solemnly. A dangerous journey, yes indeed. The forge exists at a convergence point far less stable than this sanctuary. The Forge of Worlds. Percy looked between them. That sounds ominous. It's a dimensional pocket where the laws of reality are particularly malleable, Sakura explained. A place where matter and energy from different realms can be combined in ways impossible elsewhere. It's also heavily guarded, Hikari added, by beings who don't particularly like visitors from any realm. Percy processed this information. So you want me to go to a dangerous dimensional pocket to forge a new weapon using a fragment of the original trident, all while avoiding hostile guardians. That's the simple version, yes. Hikari confirmed cheerfully. And the complicated version involves you leading a small team on what technically qualifies as an S-rank mission, through unstable dimensional boundaries. Probably fighting agents of Chronos Madara who are almost certainly watching the forge already, all while learning to channel your harmonized energy in entirely new ways under combat conditions. Percy stared at her. That's not how training usually works in my world. Hikari shrugged. Welcome to shinobi methods. We learn by doing, often with lethal consequences for failure. Efficient, if occasionally fatal. Very reassuring, Percy muttered. The team has already been selected, Fukasaku interjected, perhaps sensing Percy's hesitation. Sakura for medical support and chakra expertise. Shisui for combat prowess and his Sharingan's analytical abilities. Hikari as interdimensional specialist and team leader. And me as, what? The dimensional oddity you're all babysitting. Hikari's expression hardened slightly, as mission-critical personnel with unique abilities essential to success. This isn't a training exercise with safety parameters, Percy. This is war, the opening. Moves of a conflict that will determine the fate of multiple realities. Put that way, Percy could hardly argue. Still, the rapid escalation from basic training to interdimensional mission felt abrupt. Even by the standards of his usually chaotic life. When do we leave? He asked. resignation mixing with determination in his voice. Tonight, Hikari answered, when the dimensional boundaries naturally thin during the transition from day to night. Pack light, but prepare for variable conditions. The forge exists at the intersection of multiple elemental realms. Percy nodded, his mind already cataloging what he would need. What about Annabeth? She's been researching dimensional convergences in the Camp Half-Blood archives. Her insights could be valuable. A shadow passed over Hikari's face. That's another matter we need to discuss. But not here. She glanced meaningfully at Fukasaku. Some information is still compartmentalized, even among allies. The ancient toad didn't seem offended. Politics and secrets, always the same across all dimensions, yes indeed. Go, prepare for your journey. I will inform the other guardians of your departure. As Fukasaku hopped away toward his dwelling, Hikari gestured for Percy and Sakura to follow her in the opposite direction, toward a small grove where Greek olive trees grew alongside the massive mushrooms of Mount Myoboku. Once they were alone among the trees, Hikari's casual demeanor fell away, replaced by focused intensity. What I'm about to tell you isn't known to the Toad Sages or to most of your Greek allies. Only the highest levels of both Konoha leadership and Olympian command are aware. Percy felt a chill of premonition. This is about Annabeth, isn't it? Hikari nodded grimly. 3 days ago, she led a research expedition to the ruins of Delphi, searching for records about the previous convergence. We lost contact with her team shortly after they entered the deepest chamber of the Oracle's temple. Lost contact how? Percy demanded, anxiety spiking. What happened? A dimensional incursion, Sakura said quietly. Similar to what happened at your camp, but more targeted. Witnesses reported masked shinobi appearing inside the temple, engaging briefly with Annabeth's team, then disappearing, taking Annabeth with them. The world seemed to tilt beneath Percy's feet. She's been kidnapped by Kronos Madara's people, and you're just telling me this now. We've been gathering intelligence, Hikari said, her voice firm but not unsympathetic. Rushing in without information would only endanger her further. We believe we now know where she's being held. Where? Percy's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. A dimensional pocket similar to the Forge of Worlds, but corrupted, a place where Kronos' divine realm and Madara's genjutsu techniques have created a hybrid reality. Our intelligence suggests it's located near what you call the Sea of Monsters. So we go there first, Percy said immediately. Forget the forge, forget the weapon. We rescue Annabeth. Hikari shook her head. We can't. Not yet, not directly. The pocket realm is heavily warded against direct dimensional travel. The only way in is with a key, a focus object that can cut through those specific wards. Like a trident infused with both divine ichor and chakra, Sakura concluded quietly. Exactly, Hikari confirmed, which is why the mission to the forge just became even more critical. We're not just creating a weapon for you, Percy. We're creating the key to Annabeth's prison. Percy took a deep breath, forcing down the panic and rage that threatened to overwhelm him. Focus, think, plan. Annabeth would expect nothing less from him. Why take her? He asked finally. What does Kronos Madara want with Annabeth specifically? 2 possibilities, Hikari said. 1. Leverage against you. You're the bridge, the central figure in the prophecy. Controlling your actions by threatening someone you care about is tactically sound. Quote. And 2. Her knowledge. Annabeth Chase has spent weeks immersed in research about dimensional convergences, gathering information from sources across multiple pantheons. She may have discovered something our enemy doesn't want known, or something they desperately need. Percy nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. So we go to the forge, create this weapon/key. Then use it to break into the pocket dimension and rescue Annabeth. While also potentially confronting Kronos Madara directly, Sakura added. If they're holding Annabeth personally, this could be our first opportunity to assess their capabilities firsthand. One step at a time, Hikari cautioned. The forge mission alone presents significant challenges. We'll need to coordinate perfectly as a team, which means resolving any personal tensions before departure. Her amber eyes fixed on Percy meaningfully. Including whatever issues exist between you and Shisui Uchiha. Percy grimaced. He's made it pretty clear what he thinks of me. His personal feelings are irrelevant, Hikari said bluntly. What matters is his skill and his duty. As a shinobi of the leaf, he will fulfill his mission regardless of personal preferences. I expect the same professionalism from you. You'll get it, Percy promised. If it means rescuing Annabeth, I'd work with Kronos himself. Careful what you wish for, Hikari murmured, her expression troubled. The boundaries between ally and enemy blur during convergence events. History suggests that unusual alliances often form out of necessity. With that cryptic warning, she outlined the remaining preparations needed before their departure. Percy listened attentively, compartmentalizing his worry for Annabeth behind the focus required for the mission ahead. As Hikari described the Forge of Worlds in greater detail, a nexus point where elemental forces from multiple dimensions collided and combined, Percy felt that familiar pre-quest mixture of dread and determination settling in his gut. Dusk settled over the Convergence Sanctuary, the sky shifting through impossible colors as the light of both a Greek sunset and the strange atmospheric conditions of Mount Myoboku combined. Percy stood at the designated departure point, a natural stone circle where the dimensional boundaries were thinnest, checking his minimal equipment one last time. Riptide, of course, remained in his pocket. Though they planned to forge a new weapon, Percy refused to leave behind the sword that had saved his life countless times. Beyond that, he carried only essentials: ambrosia and nectar for emergency healing, several soldier pills Sakura had provided to replenish chakra in critical situations, and a small collection of specialized de-sealing tags designed to stabilize dimensional tiers if necessary. Ready for your big adventure, Bridge Boy? Percy turned to find Shisui approaching, dressed in standard shinobi battle gear with the addition of the distinctive Uchiha clan symbol emblazoned on his back. Despite the mocking tone, Percy noted that Shisui's usual disdain seemed muted, replaced by professional focus. As ready as I'll ever be, Percy replied neutrally, determined to maintain the truce Hikari had insisted upon. Shisui studied him for a moment, dark eyes revealing nothing. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your friend. Being taken prisoner by interdimensional terrorists isn't something I'd wish on anyone. The unexpected sympathy caught Percy off guard. Thanks. We'll get her back. We'll try, Shisui corrected pragmatically. Success depends on too many variables for certainty, especially when dealing with beings who exist partially outside normal dimensional constraints. Always the optimist, aren't you? A ghost of a smile touched Shisui's lips. Realism isn't pessimism. The sooner you learn that, the longer you'll survive as a shinobi. I'm not a shinobi, Percy pointed out. Not fully, anyway. No, Shisui agreed, his expression turning thoughtful. And that's what makes you dangerous. You follow neither set of rules completely, shinobi or demigod. You exist in the gaps between systems. Before Percy could respond to that surprisingly insightful observation, Sakura and Hikari arrived together, completing their team. Sakura carried her standard medical pack plus what ARED to be additional scrolls sealed with complex formulas. Hikari traveled lighter, with only a small pack and a curious cylindrical case strapped across her back. Final checks, Hikari announced crisply. Mission parameters reviewed and understood. Travel to the Forge of Worlds, create a weapon from the Trident fragment that can serve as both combat tool and dimensional key, return to base for Phase 2 planning, Sakura recited. Secondary objective: gather intelligence on enemy movements and capabilities. Timeline: 48 hours maximum in the Forge dimension, Shisui continued. Beyond that, dimensional drift makes return coordinates unreliable. Contingencies: emergency extraction scrolls keyed to our chakra signatures, Percy added, patting the special tag Fukasaku had given each of them. Last resort only, since they're one way and leave a traceable energy signature. Hikari nodded approvingly. Chain of command: you as Jonin commander, Sakura answered. Then Shisui as secondary, with Percy and myself as specialists with situational authority in our respective domains. Good. Hikari surveyed the team with critical eyes. Remember, this isn't a standard shinobi mission. Nor is it a typical demigod quest. We're operating in uncharted territory, literally and figuratively. Traditional protocols may require creative interpretation. With that final warning, she moved to the center of the stone circle and removed the cylindrical case from her back. From within, she produced what looked like a staff made of polished black wood, carved with Symbols that shifted and changed as Percy watched, sometimes appearing as Greek letters, other times as shinobi script, occasionally as something far older than either. A dimensional focus tool, she explained, noting Percy's curiosity. It doesn't create pathways like your parents' divine abilities, but it can locate existing thin points and widen them enough for passage. Hikari planted the staff in the center of the circle, then formed a complex sequence of hand signs. Everyone link hands, she instructed. The transition can be disorienting. Stay connected to avoid being scattered across dimensional boundaries. They formed a circle around the staff. Hikari, then Sakura, then Percy, then Shisui, whose grip was firm and impersonal as they completed the connection back to Hikari. The Kunoichi closed her eyes in concentration, her chakra becoming visible as a golden aura that flowed down her arms, through their connected hands, and into the staff. Dimensional art. Boundary walking technique. The staff began to vibrate, then emit a high-pitched tone that seemed to resonate with something deep in Percy's dual nature. The stone circle beneath their feet grew transparent, revealing not earth but a swirling vortex of colors and patterns too complex for the human mind to fully process. Don't look directly into the void, Hikari warned. Focus on me, on each other. The human mind isn't designed to comprehend the spaces between dimensions. Percy fixed his gaze on Sakura's determined profile as reality began to dissolve around them. The sensation was entirely different. Ram divine teleportation or Amaterasu's golden doorways. This felt organic, almost liquid, like sinking through layers of reality as one might sink through water. His harmonized energies responded to the transition, flowing faster through his system as though excited by proximity to the dimensional boundaries. Percy felt a strange doubling effect, as if he existed in multiple places simultaneously for a fraction of a second. Then, with a sensation like breaking through the surface of water from below, they emerged into the Forge of Worlds. Percy's first impression was of overwhelming sensory input. The forge existed at the intersection of multiple elemental planes, creating an environment where fundamental forces collided in spectacular fashion. To their left, an ocean of what appeared to-be liquid fire crashed against shores of metallic crystal. Above, the sky swirled with patterns of energy rather than clouds. Directly ahead, a mountain range floated improbably, defying gravity as chunks of earth orbited a central peak like satellites. "Welcome to the forge," Hikari said, retrieving her staff as the dimensional portal closed behind them. "One of the multiverse's natural workshops, a place where the laws of physics are more like polite suggestions." Percy struggled to find adequate words. "A lot. Focus," Shisui advised, his Sharingan activated and scanning their surroundings. "Don't let the scenery distract you from potential threats. We're exposed here." He was right. They had emerged on what appeared to be a narrow isthmus connecting two radically different environments. One a crystalline forest where trees of living gemstone reached toward the chaotic sky, the other a desert of black sand that occasionally rose in perfect geometric shapes before collapsing back into formlessness. "The forge proper is there," Hikari said, pointing toward the floating mountain range. "That central peak contains the crucible, the heart of this dimension's creative power." "How do we get there?" Sakura asked practically. "I don't see a path, and it's floating." "We make a path," Hikari replied, moving toward the crystalline forest. "The forge responds to intention and will. Those with sufficient focus can shape this reality temporarily." "Convenient," Percy muttered, following close behind. "And dangerous," Hikari cautioned. "The same malleability that Lo's creation also makes this dimension vulnerable to corruption. If our enemy has already established a presence here." She left the implication hanging as they entered the crystal forest. Up close, the trees were even more extraordinary, each one a different gemstone or mineral, from ruby to emerald to substances Percy couldn't identify. Light refracted through them in complex patterns, creating dancing rainbows across the ground as they walked. "This place feels alive," Percy observed, noticing how the crystal branches seemed to shift slightly as they passed, like curious fingers reaching out to examine the visitors. "All dimensional nexus points have a form of consciousness," Hikari explained. "Not sentience as we understand it, but awareness. The forge recognizes visitors and evaluates their intentions." "Is it friendly?" Percy asked cautiously. "Neutral," Shisui answered before Hikari could It responds to power and purpose, not morality. It would serve Chronos Madara as readily as it would serve us. If their will was stronger, then we'd better make sure ours is, Percy said. They continued through the crystal forest in alert silence, each processing the alien environment in their own way. Percy noticed that his dual energies seemed particularly responsive here, flowing with unusual vigor through his system. The harmonic seal on his chest pulsed occasionally, as though resonating with something in the environment. After perhaps 20 minutes of walking, the forest thinned, revealing a cliff edge overlooking a vast chasm. On the other side floated the mountain range, still with no visible means of access. Now what? Percy asked, peering over the edge into a bottomless void where fragments of various realities tumbled in a slow-motion whirlpool. Hikari removed the trident fragment from a protected pocket in her vest. The small shard glowed brighter here, pulsing with both sea green and golden energies. Now we begin the first test, she said, holding out the fragment. Percy, take this and focus your harmonized energy into it. The forge requires a demonstration of your worthiness before it will grant access. Percy accepted the fragment carefully. It felt warm against his skin, resonating with both aspects of his power simultaneously. Following Hikari's instruction, he channeled his energy into the metal, not separating divine ichor from chakra, but allowing them to flow together as they now naturally did. The fragment responded immediately, its glow intensifying until Percy had to squint against the brightness. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, a bridge began to form across the chasm, not constructed of any material, but composed of pure energy that matched the dual-toned light emanating from the fragment. Well done, Hikari said approvingly. The forge acknowledges your dual nature. Now we cross, quickly. Constructs like this aren't permanent in transitional zones. They hurried across the energy bridge, which hummed beneath their feet and occasionally rippled like disturbed water. Percy felt connected to it, as though the bridge were an extension of himself, responding to his steps differently than to the others. As they reached the halfway point, Shisui suddenly stiffened, his Sharingan focusing on something in the distance. We're not alone, he warned quietly. 3 figures on the mountain peak. Chakra signatures masked, but visible to the Sharingan. Identities? Hikari asked sharply, not breaking stride. Unknown, but their positioning suggests they're monitoring the approach routes. Sentries, not a welcoming committee. Could be the Forge Guardians, Sakura suggested hopefully. Or Chronos Madara's agents, Hikari countered. Either way, our approach is no longer stealthy. Prepare for potential engagement, but don't initiate combat. If they're guardians, hostility will only complicate our mission. They reached the far side of the bridge just as it began to dissolve behind them, the energy returning to a more natural state as Percy's active focus waned. Now at the base of the floating mountain, they could see a pathway spiraling upward toward the central peak, a path T defied conventional physics by sometimes running vertical or even upside down as it wound its way to the summit. The path will respond to our intentions, Hikari explained. Focus on moving upward, regardless of the apparent orientation. The forge operates on conceptual rather than physical laws in certain areas. True to her words, as they began ascending the path, Percy found that despite actions that should have been impossible to walk on, his feet remained firmly planted. Gravity seemed to reorient around them, creating the perpetual sensation of walking on a normal incline regardless of their actual position relative to the ground below. This is disorienting, Percy admitted, carefully avoiding looking directly at the horizon, which kept shifting perspective as they climbed. Your divine half should be somewhat accustomed to non-Euclidean spaces, Hikari observed. Olympus exists partially outside conventional dimensional constraints, doesn't it? Yeah, but not quite like this, Percy replied. Mount Olympus bends reality in a more predictable way. This feels wilder. The difference between divine imposition of will and natural dimensional phenomena, Shisui commented, surprisingly conversational. Gods force reality to conform to their preferences. Places like the Forge exist at the intersection of multiple natural laws, creating hybrid physics. Percy glanced at the Uchiha with newfound curiosity. Despite his generally dismissive attitude, Shisui clearly possessed a sophisticated understanding of metaphysical concepts. You've studied dimensional theory? Percy asked. A flicker of something, perhaps discomfort, Perhaps surprise at the genuine question crossed Shisui's face. The Uchiha have always had a particular interest in the nature of reality. Our visual prowess gives us unique perspectives on how chakra and matter interact. Some clan records suggest our ancestors encountered dimensional anomalies similar to the current convergence. And those encounters didn't go well. Percy guessed, reading between the lines of Shisui's careful phrasing. They ended with entire branches of our clan being erased from existence, Shisui confirmed flatly. So you'll understand why some of us are less than enthusiastic about dimensional barriers weakening. Before Percy could respond to this unexpectedly personal revelation, Hikari raised a hand for silence. They had rounded a bend in the path that provided a clear view of the summit, and the figures Shisui had detected earlier. 3 beings stood around a circular structure that Appy read to be the crucible, the heart of the forge. They weren't shinobi as Percy had expected, nor were they Greek monsters or gods. Instead, they appeared as humanoid constructs composed of elemental materials, one of living flame, one of flowing water that somehow maintained human shape, and one of crystalline earth similar to the forest they had passed through. The guardians of the forge, Hikari whispered. Elemental manifestations of the forge's consciousness. They test those who seek to use the crucible's power. Test how? Percy asked quietly. Varies based on their assessment of the visitors, Hikari replied. Sometimes it's a trial of combat, sometimes a puzzle or riddle, sometimes a demonstration of worthiness through sacrifice. Sacrifice. Percy's hand instinctively moved to his pocket where Riptide waited. I'm not a big fan of that word. Not necessarily blood sacrifice, Sakura clarified. It could be symbolic, giving up something valued to prove sincerity of purpose. They continued their approach, making no attempt at stealth now that they knew the Guardians were aware of their presence. As they neared the summit, the elemental beings turned in unison to face them. Their featureless faces somehow conveying alert watchfulness despite lacking eyes in the conventional sense. Travelers between realms, spoke the Flame Guardian, its voice a crackling, shifting sound like a campfire in wind. You seek the crucible's power. We do, Hikari confirmed, stepping forward as mission leader. We come with respect and clear purpose. Many come with purpose, replied the Water Guardian, its voice a liquid burble. Few understand the consequences of creation in this place. All that is forged here carries both blessing and burden, added the Earth Guardian, its voice a deep rumble like stones grinding together. Are you prepared for both? We are, Hikari answered firmly. The 3 guardians seemed to communicate silently among themselves, their elemental bodies shifting and flowing. Then, as one, they focused on Percy. The bridge approaches our crucible, observed the Flame Guardian. Unprecedented, unexpected. You know what I am? Percy asked, surprised. We exist at the crossroads of all realities, the Water Guardian replied. We see the threads that connect dimensions. You are a knot in that weaving, a point where separate strands become one. Your presence changes patterns established since the previous convergence, the Earth Guardian noted. The question remains, toward harmony or toward chaos? I'm still figuring that out myself, Percy admitted honestly. His candor seemed to please the Guardians, who shifted again in their silent communication. The crucible will test your worthiness through demonstration, the Flame Guardian announced. Each of you must prove mastery of your nature before creation may commence. What kind of demonstration? Shisui asked, his Sharingan still active and analyzing the Guardians' unusual chakra patterns. Combat, declared the Earth Guardian simply. Not against us, but against that which already seeks to claim the forge's power. With a unified gesture, the 3 Guardians indicated the far side of the summit, where the air began to ripple and tear. A dimensional portal different from the one they had used began to form, darker, its edges jagged rather than smooth, King a miasma of corrupted energy that made Percy's skin crawl. They were waiting for us, Hikari realized, her relaxed demeanor instantly replaced by combat readiness. Using our arrival to mask their own approach. Clever, Shisui acknowledged, drawing a kunai in each hand. They let us do the hard work of accessing the forge, then planned to ambush us once we'd opened the way. Through he dark portal stepped 3 figures that made Percy's blood run cold. They wore the same style of masks as the shinobi who had attacked Camp Half-Blood and Yggdrasil Haven, but with key differences. Hats suggested higher rank or specialized function. Their robes were adorned with symbols Percy recognized from both Greek and shinobi traditions, perverted into new forms that radiated malevolent intent. Most disturbing were the weapons they carried, hybrid abominations that combined celestial bronze with chakra-infused metal, glowing with sickly purple energy that seemed to eat at the very fabric of reality around them. Heralds of the Unified One, the Water Guardian identified them, disgust evident in its burbling voice. They have attempted access 3 times in recent cycles. Each time rejected, each time returning stronger. Unified One, Percy questioned. Their name for Chronos Madara, Hikari explained grimly. They view the forced fusion as divine ascension, the birth of a god who transcends the limitations of separate pantheons. Heresy, Shisui spat, his Sharingan blazing brighter. Madara Uchiha was a traitor to our clan and our village. Now his legacy corrupts everything it touches. The 3 masked figures spread out in a familiar formation, their movements unnaturally synchronized. Unlike the attackers at Camp Half-Blood, these operatives radiated controlled power and absolute confidence. The Bridge Child, spoke the central figure, voice distorted behind the mask. Our master will be pleased. 2 objectives with 1 operation. Sorry to disappoint, Percy replied, uncapping Riptide. The familiar sword expanded to its full length, the celestial bronze gleaming in the forge's strange light. But I've got plans that don't involve meeting your master. Your consent is irrelevant, replied the figure emotionlessly. The convergence accelerates. The bridge must be controlled before the final alignment. Enough talk, Hikari said sharply. She glanced at the Guardians. The Crucible will recognize our worthiness if we defend it from these intruders. Victory in righteous combat has always satisfied the Forge's requirements, confirmed the Flame Guardian. The 3 elemental beings already withdrawing to the edges of the summit. We will observe but not intervene. The test is yours alone. With that, the battlefield was established. 3 defenders of dimensional balance against 3 harbingers of forced unification. Percy felt his dual energies responding to the immediate threat, flowing freely and harmoniously through his system I. In a way that still felt novel but increasingly natural. Formation Beta, Hikari commanded crisply. Sakura center, Shisui left, Percy right. Analyze and adapt. These aren't standard shinobi. They moved into position with practiced coordination, the result of intensive drills Hikari had insisted upon during training. Percy took his assigned position, Riptide held at the ready, his senses attuned to both the physical and energetic aspects of his opponents. The masked operatives made no verbal communication, yet moved with perfect synchronization as they launched their attack. The one facing Percy formed rapid hand signs, then slammed his palm to the ground. Corrupted earth style. Underworld spikes. The ground beneath Percy erupted in jagged obsidian spikes that radiated both chakra and a sickly version of divine energy he recognized from encounters with underworld monsters. The technique was a perversion of standard earth-style jutsu, infused with the essence of the Greek underworld. Percy leapt aside, simultaneously calling upon water vapor in the air to form a countercurrent that disrupted the spreading field of spikes. As he landed, he immediately channeled his harmonized energy into Riptide, causing the blade to glow with the same dual-toned light as the trident fragment. Water style. Poseidon's edge. The improvised technique name came to him instinctively as he slashed Riptide through the air, releasing a pressurized blade of water infused with divine energy. The attack cut through several obsidian spikes before striking his opponent, who dodged the worst of it but couldn't completely avoid the water's divine properties. Where the water touched the operative's robe, the fabric sizzled and dissolved, revealing glimpses of unnaturally pale skin marked with what looked like sealing formulas. They've modified their bodies, Shisui called out, his Sharingan analyzing their opponents as he engaged in a blindingly fast taijutsu exchange with his own adversary. Embedded divine artifacts directly into their chakra networks. Percy processed this disturbing information as he pressed his attack, closing distance with his opponent. In close quarters, Riptide's celestial bronze would be particularly effective against the divine aspects of these hybrid enemies. The masked operative countered by drawing his own weapon, a short sword that shimmered with that same purple energy. Neither fully divine nor fully chakra-based, but a corrupted merger of both. Their blades met in a clash of opposing energies, creating a localized distortion in the air around them. Percy felt Riptide resist the contact, as though the celestial bronze itself found the hybrid weapon offensive to its nature. "Your sword recognizes the abomination," the operative observed, voice still eerily calm despite the intensity of their clash. "Pure divine bronze rejects the unified state. As do you, bridge child. You resist the inevitable merger of all realities. Maybe Becca, you's forcing things together that don't want to be merged is generally a bad idea," Percy retorted, disengaging to create space for his next attack. Across the battlefield, Sakura had unleashed her Mo.Ns Trow strength against the central operative, her chakra-enhanced fists creating craters with each impact that narrowly missed its target. Shisui had activated his Mangekyo Sharingan, the advanced foe-arm of his clan's Dujutsu, and was engaging in a complex genjutsu battle with his opponent, both shinobi seemingly frozen in place as their minds waged war in illusory space. Hikari moved between all three conflicts, her interdimensional techniques creating momentary advantages by shifting small areas of space-time to disrupt the operative's coordination. It was a masterful display of battlefield control, though Percy could see it demanded enormous chakra expenditure. His own opponent pressed forward again, blade wreathed now in what appeared to be black flames with purple cores, another hybrid D technique combining the Uchiha clan's Amaterasu technique with underworld fire. "The master offers ascension," the operative stated, the corrupted flames leaving reality scorching trails as he slashed at Percy. "Why cling to divided existence when unified power awaits? Because some things aren't meant to be forced together," Percy countered, dodging the flames while gathering moisture from the air around them. "Balance doesn't mean erasing differences." As he spoke, Percy felt a deeper connection forming with his harmonized energies, not just using them as separate tools in tandem, but really merging their properties in new ways. The water he gathered began to glow from within, infused with divine ichor that increased its density and reactivity. Without conscious thought, his hands formed signs he hadn't been taught. Guided by the intuitive understanding of his dual nature, divine water style, ocean's judgment, the technique manifested as rings of glowing water that expanded outward from Percy in concentric circles, each ring moving at a different height and velocity. Unlike standard water-style jutsu that relied on existing moisture or chakra transformation, this technique drew simultaneously from Percy's divine hydrokinesis and his chakra control, creating water with properties of both systems. His opponent attempted to counter with the corrupted black flames, but where the two techniques met, Percy's divine water proved dominant, not extinguishing the flames, but encapsulating them in perfect spheres of pressurized water that contained their reality-warping effects. Percy pressed his advantage, directing the water rings to converge on his opponent from multiple angles. The masked operative displayed impressive agility, evading most of the attacks, but couldn't avoid them all. One ring caught his left arm, the water compressing around it with crushing force enhanced by divine strength. There was a sickening crack as bones gave way, yet the operative made no sound of pain, another disturbing indication of how these servants of Chronos Madara had been modified beyond normal human limitations. With his opponent temporarily compromised, Percy glanced toward his teammates. Sakura had maneuvered her adversary into a position where Hikari could trap them in a localized dimensional pocket, effectively removing them from the battle temporarily. Shisui remained locked in his genjutsu duel, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought a mental battle invisible to the others. Percy returned his attention to his own opponent just in time to see the operative making one-handed signs despite his crushed arm, a level of pain tolerance and skill that would be impressive if it weren't so unsettling. Forbidden technique. Titan's mantle. A surge of corrupted divine energy erupted from the operative's body, forming a translucent shell of power reminiscent of the golden ichor of immortals, but tainted with sickly purple veins. The crushed arm regenerated within this energy field, bones visibly reforming. "Great," Percy muttered. "They can heal too." The empowered operative moved with increased speed, crossing the distance between them faster than Percy could track. Only instinct saved him as he brought Riptide up to block a strike that would have removed his head. The impact sent shockwaves through his body, driving him back several steps. He masters gifts make us more than shinobi, more than demigods," the operative declared, pressing his advantage with a flurry of strikes that Percy struggled to parry. We are the harbingers of unified existence. Percy felt himself being overwhelmed by the operative's enhanced speed and strength. The corrupted Titan's mantle technique granted abilities comparable to a minor god, while still allowing the operative to use chakra techniques without restriction, the worst of both worlds from Percy's perspective. Just as his defense began to falter, a black blur intercepted the operative's next strike. Shisui appeared beside Percy, his Mangekyo Sharingan blazing with pattern-shifting tomo, blood trickling from one eye, evidence of the strain his advanced dujutsu placed on his body. Your OPP Onant is temporarily occupied in an illusion loop, Shisui explained curtly. He'll break free soon, but I thought you could use the assistance here first. Thanks, Percy managed, genuinely grateful despite their usual antagonism. That Titan's mantle thing is trouble. It's an abomination, Shisui corrected, his Sharingan analyzing the technique. Divine Ichor corrupted by chakra manipulation. It shouldn't be possible. A lot of impossible going around lately, Percy observed. Together, they faced the enhanced operative, who assessed the new threat calculation with the same emotio. NLESS efficiency he displayed throughout the battle. The Uchiha joins the bridge, the operative noted. Ironic, given your clan's historical ambivalence toward dimensional stability. Don't presume to know my clan's history. Shisui replied coldly. The Uchiha protect reality's proper order. Madara was an aberration, not a template. Yet his vision becomes reality, the operative countered. The dimensions merge. The barriers fall. Old distinctions blur into unified existence. Not if we have anything to say about it, Percy declared, feeling a second wind as his harmonized energies settled into a new pattern of cooperation within him. In that moment, Percy felt something click into place, a deeper understanding of how his dual nature could function. Instead of drawing water from his surroundings as he typically did, he reached inward, accessing the divine ichor that flowed in his veins and simultaneously molding chakra to transform it into something externalized. Divine water release. Ichor current. Golden-tinged water erupted from Percy's body, flowing outward in streams that moved with sentient precision. Unlike normal water, this substance existed somewhere between liquid and divine essence, carrying properties of both. Where it touched the operative's Titan's mantle, the two divine energies reacted violently, Percy's pure ichor-infused water corroding the core. Rupted version like acid eating through metal. The operative hissed in genuine pain for the first time, retreating from the contact. Impossible. Divine essence cannot be externalized through chakra pathways. Guess I didn't get that memo, Percy replied, directing the ichor streams with increasing confidence. Shisui didn't waste the opening, his hands forming signs at blinding speed. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Multiple small fireballs shot toward the operative, each one guided by Shisui's Sharingan to target points where Percy's ichor current had weakened the Titan's mantle. On impact, the flames didn't extinguish against the divine barrier as normal fire would, but instead drew strength from Percy's ichor, expanding into blue-white flames that burned with enhanced intensity. Their impromptu combination technique proved devastatingly effective. The operative's protection crumbled under the dual assault, forcing him to abandon the Titan's mantle technique entirely to avoid it being consumed by the enhanced flames. Percy pressed forward, Riptide leading the way, while Shisui flanked from the opposite side. Caught between them, the operative made a tactical decision, diving toward the edge of the summit. Perhaps intending to retreat and regroup. Percy wasn't about to let that happen. With a gesture, he redirected his ichor current to cut off the escape route, while simultaneously using his demigod abilities to solidify the liquid into a barrier. He's mine, Shisui declared, his Mangekyo Sharingan spinning into a new pattern. Koto Amatsukami, the most powerful genjutsu of the Uchiha clan engulfed the operative, who froze mid-motion, caught in an illusion so perfect it could alter the target's very perception of reality and self. Did you just, Percy began, recognizing the technique name from training briefings, rewrite his immediate loyalties? Yes, Shisui confirmed, the strain evident in his voice. Temporarily. The technique is meant for unalt red minds. His modifications will allow him to break free eventually, but for now. He turned to the entrapped operative. Tell us about your master's plans for the bridge. The operative, still masked but now under Shisui's control, spoke in the same emotionless tone but with none of the previous hostility. The Unified One requires the bridge to complete the convergence. All dimensions must merge under a single authority. The bridge is the catalyst, the final key. How? Percy demanded. What exactly am I supposed to do in this convergence? The prophecy states the bridge shall determine the new design. Separation eternal or union complete. You are the fulcrum upon which all realities balance at the moment of alignment. Your choice determines the outcome. But what choice? Percy pressed. No one's been clear about what I'm actually supposed to decide. At the nexus point of complete convergence, when all dimensional barriers reach minimum integrity, the bridge must channel the combined energies of all realities. In that moment, intention becomes creation. If you intend separation, the barriers will reform stronger than before. If you intend unification, they will dissolve permanently. Percy exchanged glances with Shisui, whose expression revealed the same concern Percy felt. The prophecy had been frustratingly vague about the nature of the choice, but this was the clearest explanation they'd received so far. And your master, Kronos Madara, wants unification, Percy stated, seeking confirmation. Not merely unification, the operative corrected. Controlled unification. The Unified One will direct the process, ensuring the new reality forms according to his design. Those who supported his ascension will be elevated. Those who opposed will be written out of existence. Typical megalomaniac, Shisui muttered. Destroy everything to remake it in your image. The operative continued, Shisui's technique compelling complete honesty. The bridge must be controlled before the final alignment. If allowed free choice, the outcome is unpredictable. The Unified One cannot permit such uncertainty. Is that why you took Annabeth Chase? Percy asked, struggling to keep his voice level. The Knowledge Keeper is leverage. The bridge has demonstrated emotional attachment that can be exploited to ensure compliance. Percy's hands tightened around Riptide's hilt, knuckles white with suppressed rage. Where is she being held? The Convergence Citadel, a pocket dimension created by the Unified One at the intersection of Tartarus and the infinite Tsukuyomi realm. Only those bearing the Unified One's blessing can enter freely. Or someone with a key specifically designed to counter those wards, Shisui added, glancing meaningfully at the crucible behind them. Where Hikari and Sakura had successfully subdued their opponents and were conferring with the elemental guardians. Percy had more questions, but Shisui raised a hand in warning. My control is slipping. His modifications resist the genjutsu more effectively than anticipated. Sure enough, the operative's body had begun to tremble slightly, fighting against the imposed loyalty. Shisui didn't hesitate. He struck the operative with a precise blow to the back of the neck, rendering him unconscious before the genjutsu could fully break. That was intense, Percy acknowledged, looking at Shisui with newfound respect. Thanks for using your eyeball magic to get actual answers for once. A ghost of a smile touched Shisui's lips. Mangekyo techniques extract a heavy toll. I don't use them lightly. He wiped away the blood that had seeped from his eye. But I wanted answers as much as you did. They secured the unconscious operative with specialized sealing tags Sakura provided, designed to suppress both chakra and divine energy simultaneously. The other two operatives had been similarly subdued, one trapped in what Hikari described as a dimensional holding pattern, the O. They're encased in a crystalline prison courtesy of the Earth Guardians' intervention when the battle had threatened the Crucible itself. The Guardians have accepted our defense of the Forge as proof of worthiness. Hikari informed them once all three enemies were secured. The Crucible is open to us. Percy approached the central structure that dominated the summit, a circular pit filled with what appeared to be molten metal. Though its color and consistency shifted continuously between gold, silver, bronze, and other materials Percy couldn't identify. Around the rim were inscribed symbols from countless different writing systems. Some recognizable, others entirely alien. The Crucible exists simultaneously in multiple elemental planes, Hikari explained as they gathered around it. Its C.A.N. combine materials and energies that would normally be incompatible. Perfect for creating a weapon that bridges dimensional properties. What now? Percy asked, the trident fragment warm in his hand, responding to the Crucible's power. Now you must form a clear intention, the Flame Guardian instructed, the three elemental beings approaching to stand at equidistant points around the Crucible. The Forge responds to purpose and vision. What you create will reflect not just your need, but your true nature. Percy closed his eyes, focusing on what he needed, a weapon that could serve in battle against Kronos Madara's forces, but also function as a key to reach Annabeth, something that would channel his harmonized energies effectively without favoring either aspect of his dual nature. I'm ready, he said, opening his eyes with newfound clarity. Then begin, the Water Guardian instructed. Place the divine fragment into the crucible first, as the seed of creation. Percy held the trident shard over the shifting molten material, then released it. Instead of sinking, the fragment floated on the surface, glowing brighter as it made contact with the crucible's essence. Now add something of yourself. The Earth Guardian rumbled. The forge requires personal investment. Something of myself, Percy asked uncertainly. A drop of your blood would suffice, Hikari suggested. Blood carries both your divine ichor and your chakra signature. Percy nodded, then used Riptide to make a small cut on his palm. He held his hand over the crucible, allowing several drops of his Elden-tinged blood to fall onto the floating trident fragment. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The entire crucible flared with intense light, the molten material surging upward around the fragment and Percy's blood, forming a swirling vortex of energy and matter. The Guardians began a harmonic chant in a language Percy didn't recognize, their elemental bodies glowing in resonance with the crucible's activity. Now form your intention, Hikari instructed, her voice barely audible over the roaring energy. Visualize exactly what you need the weapon to be. Percy concentrated, drawing on everything he knew about both his demigod abilities and his newly awakened chakra nature. He thought of Riptide's perfect balance, of the water techniques Sakura had taught him, of the divine power he'd inherited from Poseidon and the chakra network awakened through Amaterasu's adoption. Most of all, he thought of Annabeth, imprisoned in some nightmare realm between Tartarus and whatever the infinite Tsukuyomi was, waiting for rescue. The weapon needed to cut through dimensional barriers, to pierce the wards around Kronos Madara's citadel, to bring Percy to her side. The vortex within the crucible began to contract, energy and matter condensing around the seed materials. Percy felt a pull on his own energies, as though the crucible were drawing directly from his dual nature to inform the creation process. The sensation wasn't painful, but it was intense, like part of his essence was being replicated within the forming weapon. With a final surge of light and a sound like a massive bell being struck, the creation process completed. The vortex collapsed inward, then expanded in a controlled shockwave that washed over them without harm. As the light faded, a new object floated above the now calm surface of the crucible. It wasn't the trident Percy had half expected, nor was it a traditional shinobi weapon. Instead, the forge had created something unique, a three-pronged dagger reminiscent of a sai, but with significant differences. The central blade was longer and broader, etched with Greek symbols that flowed like water across its surface, never quite settling into fixed positions. The two side prongs curved elegantly, inscribed with shinobi script that occasionally glowed with chakra-like energy. The handle wrapped in a material that wasn't quite leather and wasn't quite metal, perfectly contoured to Percy's grip. Where the three prongs met at the base of the blade, the original trident fragment was visible, now transformed into a perfect circular disc that pulsed with the same dual-toned energy Percy had come to associate with his harmonized nature. Behold the dimensional trident, the Flame Guardian announced. Neither fully divine nor fully chakra, but a true bridge weapon, the first of its kind in any reality. Percy reached out, and the weapon rose from the crucible to meet his hand. The moment his fingers closed around the handle, he felt an IATE connection, stronger than even his bond with Riptide. This weapon was quite literally part of him, created from his blood and energy, attuned perfectly to his dual nature. It's perfect, he acknowledged, feeling how the weapon balanced both aspects of his power without favoring either. As he channeled energy through it experimentally, the central blade extended, transforming into a full-length sword when fed with divine ichor, then retracting to dagger form when he switched to chakra. A weapon that adapts to your needs, Hikari observed with approval. Capable of functioning across the spectrum of your abilities. And the key properties? Sakura asked practically. Will it pierce the dimensional wards around their citadel? It will do far more than pierce them, the Water Guardian answered. The dimensional trident can create stable pathways between any realms the wielder has knowledge of. A true key to the multiverse. Percy tested this by focusing on a simple dimensio. Null shift. Visualizing a small portal to the beach at Camp Half-Blood. The trident responded immediately, the central prong glowing as it cut a small opening in the air before him. Through the portal, Percy could see the familiar shoreline. Waves lapping gently against the sand. Incredible, Shisui murmured, his Sharingan analyzing the portal's energy patterns. Perfect stability without chakra drain or divine intervention. Percy closed the portal with a thought, still marveling at the weapon's responsiveness. So we can use this to reach Annabeth. To enter this convergence citadel. Yes, but not recklessly, Hikari cautioned. Creating a portal is one thing. Ensuring we aren't detected immediately upon arrival is another. We'll need careful planning before attempting rescue. The Earth Guardian stepped forward. The Forge recognizes your worthiness, Bridge Child. The dimensional trident is bound to you alone, none other may wield it without your consent. Use it wisely, for it rise power that could either heal or harm the fabric of reality itself. I understand, Percy said, feeling the weight of responsibility settling alongside the physical weight of the weapon in his hand. Thank you for your guidance. Our task is complete, the Flame Guardian declared. You must depart now. The Forge has drawn attention across dimensional boundaries. Others will come seeking its power. What about them? Sakura asked, indicating the 3 subdued operatives. They will remain here, the Water Guardian decided. The Forge will extract what knowledge it requires, then RN them to their master, without memory of this encounter or the weapon created. Percy wasn't entirely comfortable with this solution. It seemed disturbingly close to mental violation, but recognized they had little alternative. Taking Kronos Madara's operatives prisoner would only complicate their mission and potentially endanger their base of operations. We should go, Hikari agreed, retrieving her dimensional staff. The window for clean extraction closes soon. As they prepared to depart, Percy took a final look around the extraordinary environment of the Forge of Worlds. Despite the danger and the battle, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Not just in creating the dimensional trident, but in the deeper understanding he'd gained about his own nature and the choice that awaited him at the convergence. You're thinking too loud, Shisui commented as they moved toward the descent path. I can practically hear the heroic internal monologue from here. Percy snorted. Just processing. It's been an eventful day. Indeed, Shisui's tone was uncharacteristically thoughtful. For what it's worth, what we learned from the operative changes things. How so? The choice you face isn't abstract anymore. It's concrete. Separation or unification. And neither option is inherently right or wrong. It depends entirely on how it's implemented. Percy studied the Uchiha with newfound interest. I thought you were firmly in the separation at all costs camp. I was, Shisui acknowledged. Perhaps I still am. But forced unification under a tyrant is far worse than thoughtful integration with proper safeguards. Look at you. Finding nuance, Percy teased lightly. Next you'll be saying I'm not completely useless as a shinobi. A ghost of a smile touched Shisui's lips.